Tako? Hello. Ne dela. Smo? Hello and welcome in this great environment. We just discussed if the panel, where we have a great lineup of speakers, will be boring. You'll just look outside and it's beautiful out there. But I really hope that there will be a great discussion. You know that this year's Bled Strategic Forum is about parallel realities. But there is one reality for business, and that's definitely how to spur innovation, how to invest and keep Europe as it is in order to have our great lives. We'll have really excellent speakers from politics, from business, from institutions, and I'm certain that many will know how to tell you interesting things. But before we invite the great speakers to the podium, I would also like to ask our Minister for Economy to give us the initial food for thought. Minister Han, izvolite prosim besedi.
Lepa hvala. Dovolite mi, da vas nagovorim v slovenščini. Slovenščina je en prelep jezik in pa tudi nahajate se v enem najlepših krajev v Evropi. In tako kot je rekla Ajša, če vam bo fest dolg čas, pogledajte lepote naše Slovenije.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to address you in our mother tongue, in Slovenian language. It truly is a beautiful language, and as Aisha put it so well, you are also in one of the most beautiful places in Europe, so undoubtedly there is no reason for boredom.
Čakamo sicer še ministra za finance, njega je zmeraj fajn čakati, ker sploh na vladi, ko potrebujemo denar.
We're still waiting the arrival of our Minister of Finance, and it is always a good thing when we're waiting for the arrival of the Minister of Finance, especially when we have a session of the government, when we need money to do things.
Najprej še enkrat kot minister, ki je pristojen tudi za turizem, vam seveda želim dobrodošlico na Bledu. Še posebej pa sem neizmerno vesel, da je tu na Bledskem, na tem forumu, gospodarski forum, ki je poleg vseh drugih forumov za moje pojme predvsem realističen in usmerjen v prihodnost, katero se Evropa zasluži.
So allow me to officially bid you a warm welcome as the Minister in charge of tourism. So welcome to Bled. And I'm ever so pleased to see an economic forum, economic panel taking place this year yet again, because I believe that this truly is a forum focusing on realistic ideas, and it is future-oriented, which is extremely important.
Seveda, moj poklon prvi vrsti in nič manj tudi zadnji vrsti. Vidim samo poznane osebe, ljudi, ki znajo premikati nemogoče.
And of course, my deep words of gratitude for your presence here goes to everybody sitting in the front row and all the way to the last row, because this is what will create success for us.
V Sloveniji me poznajo kot politika, ki je pripravljen odpirati dialog za razprave o prihodnosti, predvsem pa politika, ki zna poslušati ljudi, v tem primeru gospodarstvenike, tudi druge politike, ki vejo, v katero smer je treba ne Slovenijo, ampak celotno Evropo peljati.
In Slovenia, I'm known as one of those politicians who has been supported an open dialogue. A dialogue that will focus into the future, and a dialogue through which we listen to the people from the economy, we listen to those who are quite aware of where the solutions lie for our future.
Na svetovnem odru, ali pa če želite v svetu, smo priča nenehnemu prepletanju ne samo geopolitike, ampak tudi geoekonomije.
On the world stage, we are witnessing the constant interplay, not only within geopolitics, but also within geoeconomics.
In gospodarske odločitve, ki jih bomo spremljali na ravni Evrope in tudi po posameznih državah vplivajo na to globalno dinamiko. In pomembno je, kakšne so te odločitve.
And the economic decisions taken at the EU level, as well as within the member states, have had an increasingly important influence on global politics, and that is why all our decisions matter.
Trgovina, gospodarstvo, industrija, vi veste, se morajo ves čas prilagajati.
Trade, businesses and industry, as you're aware of, need to adapt constantly.
In če smo imeli v zadnjem obdobju v Evropi kar nekaj težav z tako imenovano konkurenčnostjo, z regulacijo, je to potrebno v naslednjih 5 letih absolutno spremeniti, zato da bomo na nek način na štart poziciji z drugimi večjimi državami kot Amerika, Kitajska, Indija.
And you're also aware of the fact that we've been facing some issues within the EU in reference to the competitiveness and regulations, and will definitely lead to level the field of play and introduce changes in order to compete against the USA, China, India.
Zato se moramo absolutno dogovoriti, kako bomo in na kakšen način bomo vlagali v ljudi, to je prvo. Drugo, se opravičujem, v znanje, v inovacije, predvsem pa moramo med sabo sodelovati.
Therefore, we'll need to come to an agreement as to how to invest into, first of all, people, then knowledge, and first and foremost, we'll need to focus on how to cooperate.
Slovenija je pripravljena iskati rešitve skupaj z velikimi partnerji, ne glede to, da smo manjša država, smo zelo samozavestni in imamo neke izkušnje, kaj je potrebno storiti.
Slovenia, regardless of being a small country, stands ready to discuss those matters with big players, especially on the basis of our confidence and our experience.
Digitalizacija, umetna inteligenca, biotehnologija pa so tako imenovani napredni procesi, ki postajajo, po moje, ključni za naprimer nek steber ali pa za nek razvoj družbe ali pa tudi, če želite, gospodarske strukture.
Digitalization, artificial intelligence and biotechnology provide us with advanced processes that, in my opinion, have become the main pillars for the society and for our economic structures.
Zato bomo danes med prvim in drugim panelom slavnostno podpisali ali pa podprli posebno gospodarsko inicijativo Slovenija Biotech Hills in verjamem, da ne bo ostalo samo pri podpisu, ker se veste, memorandumu, pismo v nameri je ogromno, ampak ne smejo ostati v predalih.
That is why it is today that between the first and the second panel, we are going to inaugurate or support, if you will, a special economic initiative, Slovenia Biotech Hills. And rest assured that this will not only be some signature, signing a letter of intent or some memorandum, but there will be action following this signature.
In zakaj sem optimist, da ta podpis ne bo ali pa ta dokument ne bo ostal v predalu? Zato, ker je farmacevtska panoga, biotehnološka panoga v luči vseh teh globalnih zdravstvenih težav nujna za to, da v bistvu, pa bom zdaj tvegel izjavo, svet napreduje.
Why am I claiming this? Because I believe that the biotechnological and pharmaceutical industries matter in light of recent global health challenges, and I will dare say that they will lead the way.
Spoštovane gostje, naj bojo te pogovori, kljub temu, da vas je res veliko, ne vem, koliko se bomo to vse v eni uri dogovorili, pa vendar, naj bojo usmerjeni k rešitvam, realnim rešitvam, ki bodo naredili neke korake za to, da bo ta svet lepši, da bo naša Slovenija, domovina lepša in da bomo vsi na nek način zadovoljni, kaj smo naredili tu na Bledu.
So, ladies and gentlemen, may the discussion today, even though I see so many chairs on stage, that I'm going to have to see how we are going to all express well within just 1 hour, but nevertheless, may this debate be solution-oriented, may it provide us with steps for a better world, better homeland, so that at the end of the day, we'll all be happy with what we have achieved in Bled.
Hvala vam lepa za udeležbo in srečno.
Thank you so much and all the best.
Minister Han, thank you so much. And we really could have a discussion with each of the panelists for 1 hour. But in the next hour, we'll definitely have an interesting debate about things that matter. And that is about the global trade disruption, the impacts that the geopolitical tensions, pandemics, climate change have. And according to the IMF, global economic fragmentation could cost us up to 7 trillion. That's the equal value to the combined size of the French and German economies. I'm certain that today we'll hear the solutions, and that's why, with no further ado, please join me in welcoming our guest speakers. First, Mr. Klemen Boštjančič, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance of the Republic of Slovenia. I would like to ask Mrs. Kerstin Jorna, Director General, Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs of the European Commission. With us is Mr. Matjaž, directly coming from the plane, the Secretary General Organization for Economic Development and Collaboration, OECD. Very happy that we can also invite Faris Rizaev, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Mr. Matevž Frangež, State Secretary, Ministry of the Economy, Tourism and Sports of the Republic of Slovenia. Mr. Mark Bowman, the Vice President for Policy and Partnership, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Mr. Kyriakos Kakouris, Vice President of European Investment Bank. And last but not least, representatives from the business that will also share their sides, Mr. Stefan Lang, President of Operations Novartis, and Anne-Marie de Jonge, I said I'll hardly pronounce your surname, the Schuermans, Global Head of Biologics and Injectable Operations from Sandoz. Please. Mr. Corman, if I may start with you, OECD has really good analysis and views on what we should do to stay and remain competitive and relevant as Europe.
Thank you very much. Well, just picking up on your opening remarks, the first point I would make is we must absolutely avoid economic fragmentation, resist economic fragmentation, and resist any suggestion of decoupling or the like. It would make all of us poorer. It would lead to lower growth, lower incomes, and we would pay more for the products and services we buy. Secondly, we got to genuinely engage in competition and actually be prepared to engage in competition by keeping markets keeping markets open. Any sort of move to protect ourselves from competition doesn't stop innovation elsewhere. It just means that we lose touch with people that are advancing further. We really, I mean, all of that is not to say that when it comes to supply chains, of course we should look at supply chain resilience and the like, but we've got to very carefully make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the efficiency benefits of open markets and free trade. We really have to avoid a harmful subsidy rise. I mean, there's a risk of that, where different parts of the world are now sort of, I guess, taking a more protectionist posture. If we end up in a harmful subsidy rise, it will be expensive, and it'll be counterproductive, and it'll make us less competitive. And I guess the final point I would make is, you've got a very substantial program across the European Union, the Next Generation EU program, and I guess it's going to be very important for those funds to be well invested, make good use of those funds to ensure that it genuinely improves and expands productive capacity. And so that really is a very important design and monitoring challenge, and ultimately for member states, a very important implementation challenge to get right.
Mrs. Jorna, under your lead, there are many initiatives and important ways how to really make Europe, or remain that Europe is an attractive place for sustainable business. What would be the 3 most important ones that you would like to expose and say, these are the things that I really trust into?
Well, the first point is that, we have to realize what our strengths are. The single market. And inside the single market, we learned it the hard way 5 years ago that there are supply chains and they can stop or they can break. Because before we measured products and things, but we never really looked into the supply chains. And so the first thing to do is to map, to understand supply chains. We created a chief economist network with all our member states, all the economic ministries, to actually map our supply chains, understand our dependencies, be able to scan when supply chain stress is coming. And there was a lot of cooperation, Matjaž, also with the OECD, on kind of understanding this, because when you understand it, then you can act. Based on that, which is ongoing mapping, the second thing is to look at our regulation. What's the regulation we actually need to make sure that there is secure supply chains? And we found that we need a new generation of single market legislation that's based on the business case. And when you have a business case, what you need is access to your permitting operation, access to skills, access to funding, access to market. We saw that one area where there was a lot of strain on the supply chain and it had impact on the whole economy was chips. So that was the first one. Then we were looking at raw materials, critical raw materials. And we were seeing that there was a lot coming from one country only. That's a huge dependency. And so the Critical Raw Materials Act was the second one. And then there's the question following the Russian invasion in Ukraine, energy. How do we create, the AAA energy, affordable, abundant at the factory gate? And that's the Net Zero Industry Act. And they all rely on the same principle. Access to your operations. This is harmonizing permitting times really very much across the whole of Europe and, 2 months. 12 or 18 months. Then it's the question access to funding. It's true we didn't open a new pot of funding, but we opened what we call the highway to funding and de-risking, because it's really de-risking. It's not that the public can pay for everything or that the public would have to, or the governments would have to take over the running of the economy. No way. But where we can help in a critical situation, when your product is still new and you don't have enough customer to actually reward the investment, then we can come in with de-risking and guarantees. And that's what we are doing. We just launched under the Critical Raw Materials Act for strategic projects a call. We thought 30, 50, we have 170 projects. And so now we're looking at whether they merit the strategic label. And once they have that strategic label, they get super rapid permitting, they get super rapid, and they get access to the different funds, national and European, because we need to align those. And we created a skills academy to train hundreds of thousands of people with the new qualifications. And there's also, and that's Net Zero Industry Act in particular, the market. Access to the market, using our public procurement in a more strategic way. We're talking of 14% of GDP here. If only part of this were used in a strategic way to reinforce the supply chain, to make them more diverse, less dependent, then we will all win. So the answer is map, align, invest, and think single market.
And we'll come back to the single market 3.0. But before that, I would like to turn to you, Mr. Bowman. EBRD is really playing an important role in the supply chain resilience, but also as a multilateral bank, you have an important role to help countries. What would you say are the most important things, how to answer to the critical times, and of course, to all the disruptions that we witness now?
Well, thank you very much. And I guess I'll start by very much echoing what Matjaž was saying in terms of the importance of avoiding fragmentation. I mean, the EBRD was set up in the early 1990s and has always championed competition, openness, transparency, has always very strongly believed in that these are kind of key principles of well-functioning markets. And of course, the world has changed since the 1990s. The world is not as simple as it was in the 1990s with a sort of linear path to liberalization and democracy. There are some very significant challenges. We've witnessed those. You mentioned those in your kind of opening statement in terms of pandemics, climate change, geopolitical tensions. Government intervention and protectionist policies seem to have come back into fashion in recent years. And yes, there are very good reasons for government intervention to deal with market failures, to deal with some of the challenges. But I think governments need to be very careful in terms of deciding and designing policies. And I spent most of my career working in the UK Finance Ministry, and I had a senior Treasury official who I worked for when I was a young economist who always used to have this rather wonderful expression that there's no problem big enough that governments can't make worse. Just in terms of the bank, I mean, I think that, two key points. One, I think the bank's mandate, the bank EBRD's mandate in terms of supporting countries' transition to sustainable market-based economies is just as relevant now as it ever was. We do that by investing, combining investments with policy dialogue, with a very strong focus on the private sector. More broadly, I would argue that the MDBs are just as relevant as they have ever been. And actually, I think one of the kind of positive things in international financial discussions has been the amount of attention there has been on MDBs. Yes, the importance of MDB reform, but also the importance of ensuring that they are properly financed. And in terms of, just quickly, in terms of how we support our countries, I think we've shown great flexibility in recent years, supporting our countries through the COVID crisis, supporting them with liquidity, responding to the war on Ukraine, supporting Ukraine, investing over 4 billion euros in Ukraine in the last couple of years, supporting countries that have been affected by the war on Ukraine, supporting countries through the energy crisis. Examples are our trade facilitation program, helping to keep trade flows flowing, work on financing infrastructure projects, supporting countries with the energy transition, where I think one of the positive stories of the last couple of years is the realization that renewable energy is cheaper energy, cleaner energy, but also more secure energy. So I think we have been very responsive, and we've had a very important role helping and supporting our countries in recent years. Cognizant that, our countries are situated, we work in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, our countries are situated in very challenging geopolitical regions.
Mr. Kyriakos, as a Vice President of EIB, of course, you also have the role in helping, and I would maybe turn out more to the companies, all the disruptions that are there, of course, are impacting the businesses. So could you maybe tell us a bit about how EIB is helping the companies and, of course, economies to be better and to work better?
It is a fact that, and our investment review that we carry every year and our investment report that we publish, it shows that European companies have issues of competition. I mean, the numbers, let's say it's within the globe, maybe are not that bad, because as Europe, we produce, let's say, 20% of innovation products. But we're falling behind the United States companies, and it's a new competitor now, China, Japan was also, so we really have to catch up. I mean, and we have to address, you have to identify the issues. I mean, our survey says that European companies named energy cost, uncertainty, and we have a lot of uncertainties and geopolitical issues in Europe, and also scarce of skilled force, skilled labor they have to face. So what we have to do, we have to address these issues, and this is what EIB is doing. We have a new president. Half of my colleagues, including myself, are the management committee of the bank. I mean, so our minister here is our governor, and with his colleagues, the other ministers of finance of EU, they have approved our new roadmap, and which addresses the priorities of the EU. I mean, we have 8 priorities there. Climate change is there, Mr. Bowman, climate change is there, cohesion policy is there, and it's even critical raw material are there. I mean, it's we're addressing this issue, and at the same time, we have to work together. I mean, it's a good example, I'm not going to wrong, a good example that I can give is the InvestEU. What we're doing with InvestEU, it's our mechanism for financing innovation. It's a commission instrument, and EBRD is also implementing partner with that, and there is a lot of potential to finance companies to be more innovative in order to be competitive. I mean, we have this interlink between innovation and competition, and we try to address both of them.
So we heard mapping, we heard investment, and with that, Mr. Boštjančič, it's really important to understand you have multiple roles now at this panel. At the one side, of course, important for Slovenia, but of course also as the EU Council of Ministers. Maybe your view on this, especially in perspective, how much public money should be invested and how much you need to leave to the private initiatives?
I'm very glad to be here today and the subject we're covering. And your first question was to Ms. Jorna about 3 priorities or 3 key areas that she would choose to be the most important. I'm sure that in an hour we have today, all of us would more or less align on what are the key areas where we should focus, where we should invest, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, there shouldn't be too much of difference. I've had quite a lot of experience with 3 of amazing organizations sitting with us, so with OECD, EIB, EBRD. They're all special, and we can all learn, me as a politician, from each one of them, and they're there to help us. And then, being a Minister of Finance, I've been 2 years a Minister of Finance, and in the last 2 years, the discussion on the ECOFIN meetings changed tremendously. During the last year, the key question on the meetings of the Ministers of Finance is the competitiveness. It's basically how to compete on the global market, meaning mostly China and US. While Europe has been extremely, let's say, good. I think they were good in the last years and decades regarding boosting internal competitiveness among the countries, you know, to limit the regulation within the countries, etc., etc. We somehow forgot their, you know, playground is much bigger than Europe. So I'm sure that representatives from pharmaceutical industry today will be able to tell us the numbers. I had a very good meeting on this topic a week ago, and it's good when the industry, you know, shows you your mirror. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that I think we have the competences, but we don't know how to organize it all together. And it's I don't want to be too long, probably I'll have an opportunity to talk later. Just one example, and I spoke about it on the last ECOFIN meeting, of 27 different areas EU covers, let's say the ministries in our language. There is no Ministry of Development. So basically, you know, it's a kind of a horizontal function. It's Ministry of Finance or Ministers of Finance, it's different. But, you know, this is one of the, it's not the only one, but one of the big things which I think that could contribute to the European competitiveness, to have a strong body within the EU which should align the policies of everybody else in order to follow the goals which we all know what they are.
Thank you so much. Mr. Frangež, would you say that ministers of economy should be that bodies that would understand businesses and the economy as such, and how then to find the right way, of course, to align and not to talk about big elephants in the room because we know with whom we compete, and to try to find the unique and the way together to collaborate?
Well, I'm sure that the ministers of economy consider themselves as Minister of Development. But in order to set the path ahead right, we have to agree on the analysis. And in my opinion, it is not, you know, what I hear dangerously moving around the halls, that the green transition is the problem, that too much regulation perhaps is the problem. Yes, we have terrible procedures in permitting in Europe, especially also in Slovenia. But I strongly believe that the core mistake we did was actually not the mistake of the past few years, but the mistake we made 15 years ago, when US and China, confronted by the biggest global financial crisis, decided to invest. We decided the opposite. We decided to move on a very dangerous path of lowering our investment, both in public sectors as well as in our economy. And that is why, in my opinion, why we are struggling now. Because we've missed those 15 years of investment when US made new global champions and China as a whole reinvented itself. So, in order to catch up, to once again be what Europe used to lead in, 15 years ago, Europe dreamt to be the most innovative economy in the world. That is what we have written in the Lisbon strategy in 2004, exactly 20 years ago. So, fast forward, I think it's the first investment, second investment, and third investment in one crucial thing: innovation. Innovation on how we live, how we work, how we collaborate, how we do business. And it's not only about fixing market failures. You know, you mentioned everything that the government does probably wrong. That's the old mentality of the wrong recipe. Because we are faced with tremendous challenges, not only in political security sense, but also forces that endanger our planet, living species, the resources we need for the quality of living we want. So it's not only about fixing market failures, it's also about creating markets, de-risking, and putting public investment in the highly risk sectors if we want to advance. Look at Tesla. What is Tesla? Tesla is a product of a brave public investment. Your smartphones, your touch screens, the internet, and all the great achievements are the product of the public, of the state, taking the most risky part of the innovation.
Here, I'll jump a bit in and ask Ms. Jorna, would you agree with that? And is the single market 3.0 the thing and the right answer that will lead to that? And then I'll also ask Mr. Boštjančič maybe to put his view on the public financing and the private financing. Mrs. Jorna, please.
Well, I don't know, a single market 2.0, I mean, single market is the single market. It has been there from the beginning. It's the core of the idea of bringing, you know, war battling parties together again, is to put the industry together. So for me, there's only one single market. But it has to deliver, and it has to deliver the scale. Because for any investor, I want the scale. And I'm happy to invest in innovation, but I must know that there's a journey to be made and supported from my idea to the taking to the market. And that's something that's not always visible. I mean, transformation, decarbonization of our economy, of this big European economy, requires people to bring innovation to the market, because I cannot do cement anymore as I did it, or I cannot make steel anymore as I did it. So it needs investment, it needs innovation, and that we have to accompany. I mean, in the past, before what you mentioned, there was the public pillar, public good, and the private pillar, private profit. That's no longer true. We're all in the same boat of this transition and given the challenges, and that's why we need new formats to actually work together between public and private. De-risking, I mean the financing part, is only one of the examples, and it requires to understand the risk of a project in the first place. We didn't, you know, we were used to give subsidies. You want to do something, here's the subsidy. But, you know, just guaranteeing part of the risk is a different thing to do. Also, when I compare us with the United States, IRA, you know, this is only on the supply side. But we say, no, it's not enough, because you also need a demand side. You know, it's very nice to have a lot of hydrogen and to have, I think, $3 you get per kilogram of hydrogen, but you need somebody to transport it to the factory gate, and you need someone to actually also buy it. So that's why in our policies, for the single market, we're going for the supply and the demand side. And we're working with industrial alliances to actually understand that. The Hydrogen Alliance has triggered something like above 1,000 different investment projects, who, seen in isolation, you could say as an investor, okay, is anybody buying your stuff? Or, you know, you're changing your factory, will you have enough hydrogen? By giving visibility to the whole chain, you know, that creates the hydrogen economy. And now we are walking in with a hydrogen bank to actually make sure that we can kind of, with the contracts of difference, finance that premium, where today still we don't have totally the scale, so there's too expensive, the hydrogen, for those who want to offtake, but, you know, we're supporting it in order to create the scale. So it's really about the investment, it's about innovation taking to the market, but it's also about reconsidering how we can work very smartly together, the public and the private. And I think the examples that you have from Europe are actually pretty much leading. And this access to licensing operation, access to funding, access to skills, access to market, this kind of way of thinking is pretty unique in the world. And if I see the reaction to our Critical Raw Materials Act, I mean, they will bring up these projects for you investors on the panel and in the room to walk in and, you know, be sure that that's a good investment case in Europe.
Mr. Boštjančič, and then Mr. Chüermans, maybe also this turn from the subsidizing to investing, is it important?
I believe the original question was regarding the financing all these needs, goals through the budgets. The answer is very simple, absolutely no. There's neither EU budget or any of the member states' budget large enough to finance all the projects we want to do. I'll just name one, green transition. The cost of green transition is enormous, and whoever thinks that this can be financed through the national budget is I'll be polite and will just say is very wrong. So I think that the answer, not for everything, but for most of the project, lies in public-private partnership. I'm a big fan of it. And I'll say only two reasons for this. First of all, is, like I said, there's not enough public money. And there's, on the other side, a lot of private money. Just in Slovenia, as you know, it's 30 billion euros on the bank accounts of individuals, which is almost 45% of the GDP of the capital, which is not used. The second reason, even more important, is that I believe that through the private sector, that it's absolutely necessary to have a private initiative in all those projects, because this is on a long term the condition that those projects will be done effectively. And again, institutions like EIB, EBRD are waiting for that kind of projects. And I think we should start at home. You know, when I talk about this with my colleagues in the government, everybody says, yes, we understand, but give us money from the budget. Well, of course, because it's the simplest way. You know, in order to get the private public partnership projects, you have to be convincing to the private part, which is usually more difficult. But then, again, like I said, that's the only way to go.
Mr. Schuermans, private-public partnerships, and of course, the turn from the subsidizing to investing.
Well, I mean, it's not an either-or. I mean, of course, you need both. I mean, you need public investment, you need public support to, to achieve social policy objectives, environmental policy objectives, where, in particular, where there's market failure, or where you want to accelerate certain developments. But it's got to be well targeted, it's got to be well designed, it's got to not be market distorting, and it's got to make sure that it doesn't crowd out, but that it rather leverages in private investment. I mean, in the end, I mean, private investment will help you drive, a more efficient resource allocation over the medium to long term. So, I mean, I think you need to have a balanced approach between both, but you've got to be very clear on the public policy objective you're trying to achieve, and you've got to be very careful in how you design it to make sure you don't end up creating counterproductive signals into the market.
Maybe now we'll turn to one thing that we heard from almost every of you, and that's energy. Maybe a year ago it was present in every talk. Now it seems that we are better off, but probably all the experts would say that the crisis is far from over. And that's why I would like to turn to you, Mr. Rizaev, as a Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Azerbaijan. It's important to know that in 2022, Azerbaijan and European Union signed a memorandum of understanding, and because of that, Azerbaijan will increase the volume of gas that will be imported. But on the other side, you also talk a lot about the green transition and why it matters that the transition is done. Of course, also the corridors of energy. So many things that energy will influence on, and Azerbaijan is an important partner of the European Union and Slovenia.
Thank you, madam. It seems like you basically stolen a bunch of my talking points. And now I have to improvise. But seriously speaking, Azerbaijan's been playing a role of reliable energy security partner of Europe and European Union in particular since the mid-90s. It was my country, Azerbaijan, which reopened the crucial vital regions of the South Caucasus, Caspian Basin, and Central Asia for the world. This was not a natural process. as many people think, and Azerbaijan never got due credit for that. This was a deliberate political strategy taken by our country in a very deliberate and thought-through manner. We see our region, the greater region, not as a place of confrontation, but as an area of cooperation with enormous potential. Azerbaijan helped Europe and the world to diversify first the origin of energy supply. Then we took on the matter of diversification of the routes of delivery, building completely, fully new oil and gas pipelines. And we coupled it with building the first ever railway connecting our region to Europe in history. And now we are talking about the new strategic project, which is tentatively called the Middle Corridor. One just needs to take a brief glimpse at a geography map to understand the crucial importance of the South Caucasus and Azerbaijan in particular. We literally sit on a crossroad of various ways and routes. Both traditional northern and southern routes are not exactly fully available now for a bunch of reasons, mostly political. So the only place, if one wants to carry something or someone across Eurasia from east to west and vice versa, the only place to do this by land is Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan provides Europe with the only point of physical access to Central Asia. And Central Asia is a treasure trove, literally. Those guys are sitting on a mountain of resources, starting from oil and gas and ending with gold and uranium. So we believe that this vision, this design, fits very well into European strategy of connectivity. And that can be a next success story in the relations between Azerbaijan and Europe and the greater world. But when it comes to traditional fields of oil and gas, of course, Azerbaijan is playing and will continue to play the role of a reliable, and I want to stress the word reliable, energy partner for Europe. We will never be able to fully replace a known traditional partner former traditional partner of Europe. The numbers are not there. But in case of individual member states of European Union, and very importantly, for the region where we are today, in case of many partner countries, associate states of European Union, the role, the contribution, the supplies from Azerbaijan are indeed crucial. And we will keep our word, and we will continue to do everything we can to implement the deal made in 2022, to which you referred earlier. And we are already well ahead of schedule in doing this. I believe that gas from Azerbaijan either has already started or will start to reach the Slovenian market for the first time in history. And since yesterday, our gas reached your neighbors in Croatia, which is something to celebrate.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely. And searching for the partnerships and looking beyond. Before we ask for the mirror view from the pharma industry, maybe just quick two interventions from Mr. Bowman and Mr. Kyriakos on the green transition, important part of your work. Maybe in one sentence, what do you think is of the key importance in this regard? So
the green transition, the energy transition are absolutely critical priority for EBRD. I actually think this links very much to the earlier conversation we were having in that, governments cannot provide the investments needed for the green transition, for the energy transition, but that's not to say that governments don't have a very important role. Governments have a critical role in terms of creating the conditions, in terms of creating the markets so that private sector investment can flow. And if you look across our region, countries that are successful with the energy transition, with renewable energy and attracting private sector, they're countries that set out a political ambition, that have a kind of clear political ambition to give a signal to investors. They're countries that invest public money into the grid, critical parts of the infrastructure, that create a regulatory environment that gives certainty to investors and rely on market-based mechanisms, auctions or whatever. So it's, as I say, I think it links very much to the earlier conversation. Public money cannot deliver the energy transition, but governments have an important role to play in terms of creating markets so as to deliver that transition.
Mr. Kyriakos, how many times per day you say green transition?
I don't say it too many times, but my colleagues, they say it every 2 words is the one. I mean, we are known as the EU Climate Bank, and I don't want to be repeating what my colleague Mr. Bowman said or the minister said. Just, it's one way. I mean, we have to go to that way. I mean, definitely we have to go to the green transition. We really have to go to more renewables. We have to retire our polluting transport means, and also let me bring another issue. It's that we have to address the disparities among the large cities and the small cities. I mean, the small cities or the isolated part of any countries. I mean, they have to be part to the green transition. They need financing. And we have to work together. I mean, it's. I'm really glad listening to the minister, and it's one doing one step. I mean, it's if the government understands that, we have to work together. I mean, it's. We have the Commission money. I mean, through the cohesion policy, the Commission money through the cohesion policy. We have. We are as EBRD, other multilateral development banks, but we have to work together and take it just, if I just to repeat the minister, is that in order to really mobilize the private sector. I mean, it's that's the way forward for the green transition.
So that's why let's start with the private sector and let's put the mirror out there. Mr. Lang, as a CEO of one of the most important pharmaceutical companies in Europe, and we all know that Europe pharmaceutical sector is a major contributor to EU economy. You can definitely tell what do you need, and of course, how do you see the innovation and the sector development, maybe from the broader sense, and of course from your first-hand experience.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and let me just correct, I'm not the CEO of Novartis, but
COO, right?
The president of operations, but
okay.
Responsible for many operational matters. And as you all know, Novartis is a leading innovative medicines company, and we have a strong global presence, but we have also a large footprint across Europe and Slovenia. We have in Europe more than 60 locations may be related to R&D, to manufacturing or commercial operations, and we have more than 30,000 direct employees of our company, and our activities, they have generated a multiple of work related to that. I think what is also important to note is that we have a large manufacturing network, 35 sites, and we have a very innovative portfolio. We deliver proudly every year almost 20 billion units of very complex medicines like gene therapy, highly complex biologics, and our sites and our people are really equipped and proud to do so. And most importantly, our footprint in Europe is in a way that we produce 2.5 times more medication than we sell in Europe. So we produce truly in Europe, for Europe, but also for the world. And for us, patients is the #1 priority. We service our treatments every year, almost 300 million patients. This is the commercial product with our well-known brands. At the same time as research and development is such a core for us, we of course have a large R&D pipeline. And here again, we have a large presence in Europe, more than 100 clinical programs. And as we speak, we have 30,000 patients on clinical trials in Europe. So patients are important for us. And of course, this requires an innovation focus, and this does not come naturally, but it requires large investments. So almost 20% of our annual sales, we reinvest in research and development. That's close to 9 billion every year. And I think beyond the value we create through treatments and the care, I think everywhere we operate, I think we have also many opportunities to create more value. A good example is Slovenia. We have been the first innovative medicines company to establish development and manufacturing activities for innovative medicines here. Very grateful for the great collaboration, for the environment, for the support of innovation here in Slovenia. We have grown over the past 10 years very substantially. Now we have 3,600 associates here, very diverse workforce, a talented team, 30% highly educated associates with a master degree or a PhD, almost 40 nationalities, women in leadership in our company in Slovenia touches almost 50%, 47, we're almost there, and I think a lot of reasons to be proud. We've invested in infrastructure, 3.5 billion over the past few years to build manufacturing sites, process technology, of course, collaborations with institutions, the universities, a lot of good work underway, and being with such a large footprint here also, keeping that up to date is of course also a continued engine of work and value we create here. So this is very, very good to note, and I think we are a successful company, and I think our drive is innovation for the success today and for tomorrow. And then I think it's very important that the environment in Europe stays like this. I know pharmaceutical industry is a regulated environment, but as regulations are reviewed and evolving, I think it's very important that we all keep in mind that we need this environment for innovation to remain competitive as compared to other regions.
Would you say that those who are regulating are seeing the mirror view enough? Is pharmaceutical and biotech industries have enough of the ear of the decision makers that you will remain here and can perform and invest into R&D?
Yeah, look, overall there is a very constructive dialogue, and this is a win-win situation to look at what we can do as an industry for allocation, but also, of course, for society. At the same time, when we look at the facts and we look at Europe versus other areas, I think Europe has lost ground in the past years. So 20 years ago, the majority of new medicines came from Europe. Now it's not Europe anymore. Now it's the US, and you can look through many indicators, may it be number of patients in clinical trials, where other geographies pick up investment, public funding of R&D, venture capital money. You see a similar trend, typically US and China growing significantly, and in Europe being stagnant and sometimes declining. Regulatory approval timelines, I think it takes much longer to get a drug approved in Europe than in the US, and it also takes much longer once there is a drug approved until there is access for patients to this medicine. So I think these are facts, and I think it's really a call for action. More than willing as pharmaceutical industry to be at the table with policymakers to talk about it, but I think clearly what needs to be preserved is intellectual property, which is for sure very important for a pharmaceutical innovator company. There is the need to review how can we streamline the regulatory review and approval process, not only for marketed products, but also for clinical development programs, that we get this trend reversed. And also, we don't need additional new risks, which would basically make us not competitive. And one recent example is the open wastewater treatment regulation, which is basically foreseeing that only two industries, so pharmaceutical as well as cosmetics industry, they shall be responsible to care 80% of the cost burden. Of course, we are ready to take our share, but overall, this is not, I think, a trend in the right direction. So certainly call for action. As innovator medicine company, we have managed over the past years to establish in a complex environment with new technologies coming up. It takes 12 years now to bring a new product to the market. It costs 2 billion, and I think we need to maintain that ecosystem and this setup that we can really continue to innovate. And I think it's a win-win, but of course, important decisions need to be taken over the near future. And I think a forum like here could hopefully be also a catalyst for this dialogue.
Thank you so much, Ms. de Jonge-Schuermans. Maybe I would like now with you to turn to the question. You can really tell from the first-hand experience the way from the startup all the way up to the boardroom. So this is really dynamic sector that you work in. You work in Sandoz. What would you say, how can all of the decision makers help to do the ecosystems that would then provide that Europe will stay relevant and be competitive to the competitors?
Thank you for the invitation to be here and to speak on behalf of Sandoz, who is a biosimilar and generic company. So clearly what we need as an industry, and I really see it, the industry going from innovation, discovering new compounds, to development, approval, launch, and then the follow-on medicines where Sandoz is active. For us, it's important to see this as one ecosystem that is basically fueled by science. And really, for Sandoz, it's all about expanding access to patients. So we treat roughly 800 million patients in the world. And for us, it's important that biologics, that we are having a good framework, good conditions in order to develop those biosimilars. So recently, I think 50% of the medicines approved in Europe are biologics. Only around 50% of those biologics that will go off patent in the next 5 years have follow-on projects in the pipeline. And for the healthcare system, it's incredibly important that we can bring those savings to the society and the healthcare system. But in the end, the entire sector along the medicinal life cycle basically is fueled by the same skills, people, setups. So what is also important to be relevant in Europe is that we keep investing, because if we don't invest, we stand still. And what we see here in Slovenia, we are having some interesting investment projects. We are building a factory in the east of Slovenia, a 400 million investment, as well as a development center here in Ljubljana. We find here a very good ecosystem, and we are able to attract the talent that we need. But beyond that, we also need a regulatory framework that allows us that once innovative medicines, biologics, come off patent, that we are able to launch products. So it needs to be a good regulatory framework as well. Then to stay relevant and to make it worthwhile, it should also be a sustainable market condition. It should not be the run for the cheapest, because then the incentive would become diminished. So in terms of ecosystem, it's around talent, people, skills, regulatory framework, and then the economic conditions that allow us to continue to invest in our infrastructure and in our people.
Many things we have said, and we heard a lot about collaboration, about mapping, understanding. We are coming to the last 10 minutes And I really could talk with any of you, as said, more than for an hour. But that's why I would like to give everyone a minute. In business, we talk about elevator pitches. That's really just to store house, maybe just to go one round before we end up, maybe your echo to what we have heard, and what would be your plea to the business community, but also, of course, to the decision makers. What are the things that we need to do, especially if you can have the talents and the people development in mind, because this is something that Europe is still known for, that we do have talents, we do have skills, and of course, the quality of life. So maybe we would start with you, Mrs. de Jonge.
And maybe I can give a Slovenian example here. So we are building a factory in the northeast of Slovenia, in Lendava. And this is not a traditional biotech hub in Europe. And what we are doing there is we are basically installing a training center together with a local university, the University of Maribor, where professors from the university come and teach on site. But on the other hand, the university is also integrating biotech modules in their bachelor and master's program. And I think this is a good example where industry and the public sector work together to invest in skills that actually are transferable across the biotechnology sector. But this is really what it's about. To stay competitive long term, we need to invest in our talents and our workforce.
Mr. Lang, your view and where the future lies for pharmaceuticals in order to stay competitive in Europe?
I would also like to take the topic of talent and talent development, because I believe what has made us successful so far is not good enough for the future. When I look at the pharmaceutical sector, the technology advancement, genetics, biotechnology, cell therapy, gene therapy, all of that is already, I believe, the next advancement. In parallel, we see the advent of technology, generative AI, I think increased automation. I think we have a solid foundation, and the example is here in Ljubljana, with the university to have an industry pharmacy degree designed together. We have exchanges, but I think we need to have a stronger partnership, I think, across the entire ecosystem to be ready for the future, because what's very clear is, yes, educational background is important as a starter, but then I think it's a long life learning on the job, and as technology evolves, I think that's for me one of the key focus areas moving forward.
Thank you so much also to mentioning the new technologies, because currently more than 1/3 of the European workforce lacks the digital skills required in all jobs. So this is something that we definitely should not forget. Mr. Kyriakos, your last minute.
Definitely we have to invest in innovation. Definitely we have to invest in skilled force, and definitely we have to concentrate, as I said, in remote areas in order to, for young people to stay in their places. I mean, Professor Leda, in his report about single market, he said that, I mean, about the right to stay, I mean, the freedom to stay. So definitely we have to educate people and to stay and to direct our policies to that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Corman. Creating opportunities.
Thank you. Well, I mean, the first point to make, which I should have made up front, but which sort of, I guess, I was reminded of listening to the discussion. Europe actually is starting from a very strong starting position on the foundation of its single market. So in terms of international competitiveness, that very large single market does give you a very strong starting position. But it's important to go beyond the single market and to remain open to the rest of the world. And when I look at things like, some of the global challenges we're facing as a global community, climate change, and we're getting the approach to the digital transformation, and I continuously write. I mean, I think that there is scope to do more on that side. I mean, when it comes to tackling climate change, we need significant additional technological innovation. Yet, across OECD member countries, the patents on environmental technology progress are actually going down. So, I mean, I think that there is opportunity for a very strong and successful Europe to perhaps be more active and more open in terms of its global engagement on some of these topics. And then one thing that we haven't talked about in the context of competitiveness across Europe and across other OECD member countries, I mean, there's very significant population aging as a trend. And so to navigate all of the mega trends that are in front of us and to also deal with the implications of population aging, we really need to get that education, skills development, and upskilling, reskilling, and lifelong learning piece right to make sure that we maintain that momentum through that period ahead.
Thank you so much. Mr. Boštjančič?
Mr. Corman made an excellent remark regarding Europe had a, I think had, not have, an excellent starting advantage over everybody else, but we somehow lost it somewhere. I mean, yes, it's great that it's the biggest democracy in the world. It's great that everybody can say whatever he or she wants. But at the end of the day, it's still, we have to make a decision. And to go the way we decide to is not something everybody will support. So basically it's not enough to listen to each other, we have to hear each other. And I think it's smart to listen, people who show through their results that they know what they're doing. And the politicians should just, try to make the environment good enough that in this environment that they can find their goal, which is being the best, not having to go out of Europe. And that's why I'm glad to have representatives from this industry, which it's extremely important for our country. And I know that our government, and this is not a political speech, is really, we'll try to do everything to hear them and to accommodate not them, their companies. But I truly believe with creating the environment, this will be helpful to those who are, serious in talking about development. So.
Thank you so much, Mr. Frangež.
It's about the ecosystems, creating them, incentivize them, so to boost collaboration. We have a great example of another European innovation, Strategic Technologies for Europe platform. It's a European task, how to boost the net zero industries, the biotechnological sector, the digital technologies, as well as the deep tech. And we've had a study visit to all three top-notch Slovenian research and innovation institutes recently. And what we saw is that also in Slovenia, there are dreamers with a lot of knowledge and ideas how to turn their dreams into reality through really excellent innovation. And in this sense, they need also partners in industries as well as in the state that will understand that the investment in those technologies that might be the next winning technology of tomorrow's world bring risks, and that we should all think about how we should de-risking it.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Jorna?
Slovenian mountains. If you go to these mountains, you need a rope. If your rope is made from one string, then when it breaks, you're down. And that was the end of your trip. And supply chains is like a rope. So our companies had very big ropes, but made from one string to one country only. not to name the one in China. So what we need is ropes made of several strings. And this is really the policy we have. And it doesn't mean all the strings have to be from Europe. If you take the Critical Raw Material Act, it says 10% mined of our consumption mined in Europe. It means 90% coming from somewhere else. It says 40% of our consumption refined in Europe, but it means 60% from somewhere else. And that's what we are after, that we build these diversified supply chains and that we build them in a smart way with our partners. On raw materials, we now have 14 raw material partnerships, and it's about business to business. It's about off-takers from Europe and technology from Europe going to suppliers and building value chains in other countries. So it's really being open, but it's being better for everyone, because a more resilient supply chain means that you reduce the risk for everyone in the supply chain. And if you have a rope that has several strings, it also helps you in the mountains.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kirzayo, important rope of partnership is between EU and Azerbaijan. The last minute that you would like to tell us what?
Thank you, Madam. This panel has been a great educational exercise, and everything I heard today reinforced in my mind three particular points. Vision, strategy, and partnership. Vision to see and understand the problems and the goals. Strategy is to design and plan your way, your roadmap to get there. And partnership is to build an alliance or coalition or a group to actually work on implementation. Azerbaijan has been, is, and is ready to be a part of these three particular components. We are doing our part. And I did not mention this at all, but tomorrow my distinguished colleague is going to speak about our present role as the COP29 chair and host. This is another evidence of Azerbaijan's role and contribution to world stability, security, and development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Mr. Bowman.
Thank you very much. I think I get the final word. The world faces very significant geopolitical and economic challenges, but I think my key message is don't forget about the importance of markets and competition and the role of governments creating and supporting those markets.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll ask everyone to say a big thank you to the panelists. You are really to the point. Thank you. So thank you so much. And now I'll ask you something, to stand up and turn for 180 degrees. Why? Because now is the time that we will sign the biotech hills between the private initiative, as said, and with the Slovene government. Thank you again for the great contribution. So we would be glad if you stay with us, discussing how Slovenia has an answer on the biotech hills. It's really important that we try to have concrete answer to that. So thank you to everyone who needs a cup of coffee. Coffee is outside, but for those who would like to hear about the Slovenian answer to the all challenges and disruptions that we see, we will be glad if you stay. So, Borut, hope the microphone will work. Yeah, it works.
Let's see. Papa, 1, 2, yeah, it works.
Yeah, it works. So maybe we will wait 30 seconds and then I'll ask you the question. It's not always easy to keep the middle part. So you're welcome to be with us in order to hear about the Biotech Hills, the new initiative that Slovenia as a government and the private sector will today try to basically put the grant opening. But Borut, you are the one, the co-founder and the CEO of Labena. You are the representative of Slovenian company that works in the region. and you are actually the one that started with the idea Biotech Hills. So my first question, of course, will be, why Biotech Hills? Maybe we will wait another...
So maybe everybody interested, sit down. Let's calm down a little bit. So the chairs are around, so I'll give you 10 seconds. So 10, 9,
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's not a new year, but it's Slovenia Biotech Hills that will be publicly and officially announced by Minister Han and President of Slovenia Biotech Hills Institution, Mr. Loljo. But before, I would really like to hear your view, why it matters that SMEs, big corporations, institutions, and the governments work together.
So basically, Slovenia is a family company with a 30 years tradition. We work over 20 years in a wider region, and we know the wider region quite well. And I think it's a unique chance for Slovenia at the moment to keep the lead and take the lead. Why? Slovenia is among the first exporting countries of medicines in the region. First. Secondly, we see bigger investments, as we heard on the panel that you led before, from major biopharmaceutical biotech companies. As well, we have quite strong, also local pharmaceutical industry that invests year to year. And, you know, all this raises competitiveness of Slovenia. It also attracts new highly educated people, and in the end also raises up the average added value of the employee.
We were discussing at the previous panel that it's so important that people stay in Europe, that we see the opportunities here. Do you think that Biotech Hills as such can help in providing that?
I think yes. I think what we will strive for is basically to raise competitiveness of Europe and of course the region as well. But you know, numbers speak for itself. For example, in Slovenia, about 6% of GDP is made from biotechnology and pharmaceutical sector. Plus, it employs 10,000 people directly and 40,000 people more indirectly. More than 300 million, this will be interesting for the Minister of Finance, 300 million corporate tax is given by this sector. As well, more about 180 million of investments into R&D from this sector. The patent, we talked about innovation before on your panel, the patents are up averagely 15% in biotechnology yearly. So, you know, I think the geostrategical position is great of Slovenia. So I think it's the right time, the right position, and, you know.
And the right country.
Exactly.
Super. So Slovenia Biotech Hills will be not asking just give, but it will give. So this is something that it's really important that we see the potential also in really not being just answer for Slovenia, but for autonomy of Europe.
Exactly. So there are a few ideas, but I'll maybe just highlight a few most important ones. Like we heard before, first is infrastructure, then is getting talent in, and with them comes innovation, and with that comes money. So not only for Slovenia, but also the wider region. So we will strive for more investments of R&D, breakthrough R&D innovations, manufacturing sites in biotech and pharmaceuticals in Slovenia, but also enhancing a wider region.
The founding partners that will definitely open the door, the windows, the hearts to everyone to create the ecosystem are Novartis, Lake Sandoz, Labena, AmCham Slovenia, and Herman & Partneri. So we really are the starting point of something that we really would like to include as many as possible. Maybe shortly your view on that?
Exactly. The idea is basically to build an ecosystem in Slovenia from the bottom up. So startups, companies already in biotech, pharmatech, which are established, other pharma companies, we have quite a few. I mentioned some of the exports on the medicines before, and build up this to a destination that really pops out in Europe and pops within and without, and also that hopefully we can convince also the government to give some incentives to get some highly educated people in so we can build all these things up.
So, Borut, something big is happening here in Bled today. Zato bom prosila predsednika zavoda Biotech Hills, gospoda Roberta Lolja, da nas nagovori in pove tudi svoj pogled. Robert, izvoli.
Hvala lepa, Ajša. Hvala lepa, Borut. Lepo pozdravljeni. Še posebej toplo bi rad pozdravil ministra za gospodarstvo, turizem in šport, gospoda Matjaža Hana. Seveda vse udeležence Bledskega strateškega foruma, hkrati pa tudi vse ustanovne partnerje pobude Biotech Hills, ki so v zadnjem obdobju naredili resno veliko delo, ki ga bomo, upam, da danes kronali z slovesnim podpisom pisma o noveli tudi pri sodelovanju z vlado Republike Slovenije. Kot je nekaj omenil že... Izvolite.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Borut. I wish to extend especially warm words of gratitude to the Minister of the Economy, Tourism and Sport, Mr. Matjaž Han. And of course, I wish to welcome all the participants of Bled Strategic Forum and the founding partners of Slovenia Biotech Hills. You have done an amazingly great job, which will be crowned by this moment of signing the official document with a letter of intent.
Kot smo že slišali na panelu in tudi v uvodu v ta današnji dogodek, je biotehnološka panoga ena najbolj pomembnih in najbolj propulzivnih panog tudi v Republiki Sloveniji. In kar je meni še posebno veselje, ne samo v Republiki Sloveniji, ampak že danes igra pomembno vlogo tudi v regiji in svetu.
As we have already heard within the panel discussion and in the introductory words, biotechnological industry is extremely important and propulsive, not only in Slovenia, but I'm ever so pleased to note that also globally.
In kar je še posebej pomembno, biotehnologija sodi med panoge, kjer je dodana vrednost na zaposlenega izredno visoka.
And what is even more important to note is a very high added value within this industry.
In v Sloveniji že danes dosegamo nivo 100.000 evrov dodane vrednosti na zaposlenega, kar je strateški cilj vlade Republike Slovenije za celotno gospodarstvo do leta 2030.
And it is wonderful to note that we are already reaching 100,000 euros of added value per employee, which actually has been set as a strategic goal of the government of the Republic of Slovenia for 2030.
Zato je nekako najbolj naravno, da če želimo tako panogo kot tudi državo peljati naprej na višji nivo, da ne stojimo na mestu, kar smo slišali na panelu, ampak uporabimo, kar je rekel minister, slovensko samozavest in naredimo iz tega, kar danes imamo, še nekaj večjega, boljšega in močnejšega.
And to follow a natural trend for the industry. I believe that it is extremely important to reach a higher level to follow what has already been noted within the panel. We should not stand still. And the minister put it so beautifully. We need to stand on our confidence in order to build a better and more prosperous world.
In zato smo ustanovni partnerji pobude skupaj z vlado Republike Slovenije prepričani, da lahko še naprej nadgradimo ekosistem v naši državi.
That is why the founding partners, in cooperation with the government of the Republic of Slovenia, believe that we truly can upgrade on what has already been achieved.
In seveda to na področju kadrov in izobraževanja.
Talking about human resources, training, education.
Na področju ugodnih pogojev za zagonska podjetja.
Looking into the beneficial conditions for startup companies.
Na nadaljnji podpori razvojno-raziskovalnim in investicijskim projektom.
Based on further support for research and investment projects.
In seveda ne nazadnje na celotnem poslovnem in zakonodajnem okolju.
And last but not least, based on beneficial business and economic environment.
Zato skupaj z vlado želimo dejansko skreirati in dopolniti strategijo razvoja panoge do leta 2030.
That is why, together with the government, we wish to work on our strategy of the development of our industry by 2030.
In da zadeva ne bi ostala v predalu, bomo že v bližnji prihodnosti pripravili tudi akcijski načrt delovanja do leta 2026.
And this will be followed by an action plan by 2026, so that the before-mentioned document does not remain in some drawer.
In zato verjamemo, da bo ta aktivnost oziroma ta pobuda dejansko nek win-win, tako za panogo, ki jo želimo dejansko dvigati na višji nivo.
Therefore, we believe that this initiative will be a win-win situation for our industry, which will be raised to a higher level.
In tudi za celotno ekonomijo, saj bodo nova delovna mesta za tako visoko dodano vrednostjo dejansko omogočala tudi razvoj države kot take.
And it will be beneficial for the state as such, because additional jobs with added value will be beneficial for the country and the economy as a whole.
Zato že danes vabim tudi ostala podjetja, partnerje, ki smo jih povabili k sodelovanju in projektu, da se nam pridružijo.
That is why allow me to use this opportunity today to extend our invitation to the companies that we have invited to join us.
In prva priložnost za to bo že 13. septembra, ko organiziramo prvo srečanje Biotech Hills z vsemi ključnimi deležniki, ki jih želimo imeti pri projektu zraven.
And your first opportunity to join us officially will be on September 13th, where we will have the first session with all stakeholders of Slovenia Biotech Hills.
In na koncu naj se samo zahvalim ministru za gospodarstvo, celotni vladi za pripravljenost prisluhniti in deliti našo vizijo razvoja panoge. Hvala.
In conclusion, allow me to sincerely thank the minister and the government of the Republic of Slovenia for your willingness to hear us and your willingness to share our vision for the future.
Gospod Loljo, najlepša hvala. Seveda pa je zdaj čas, da povabimo tudi ministra za gospodarstvo, turizem in šport, ki, kot je rekel predsednik Biotech Hills, je prisluhnil, razume in zato tudi spodbuja tovrsten razvoj. Izvolite, prosim.
Hvala lepa še na drugi strani dvorane in lep pozdrav. Cenjeni soustanovitelji Slovenia Biotech Hills.
Thank you very much and welcome from the other side of this beautiful hall. Allow me to again welcome all of you and extend a special welcome to co-founders of Slovenia Biotech Hills.
Ne vem sicer, kdo je prepisoval glede govora, ampak imamo z Robertom isti govor.
I'm not sure who is behind the speeches because we nearly have the same sentences for me and Robert.
To pomeni, da je ideja, ki so jo soustanovitelji predstavili ministrstvu, prava ideja in smo tu na poenoteni.
Which already speaks for itself that the idea behind this project has been uniform and it was therefore supported by our ministry.
Vesel sem, da s tem podpisom delamo konkretne, ampak res konkretne korake na področju povezovanja slovensko mednarodno biotehnološke in farmacevtske industrije in dodal bi, da gre to za resne igralce na tem področju.
I'm extremely pleased that today, with this signature, we are taking concrete steps in connecting the Slovenian international biotechnological and pharmaceutical industry. And let me note that these are serious players who are with us today.
Preprosto Slovenija se želi, da postanemo osrednjo svetovno stičišče biotehnologije in farmacije in tudi na nek način razvojna in raziskovalna destinacija, ki bo v Slovenijo pripeljala najboljše strokovnjake iz vsega sveta.
We wish to become a central global hub for biotechnology and pharmaceuticals, as well as research and development destination that will attract the leading experts from around the world.
Prepričan sem, če smo lahko v športu svetovni šampioni, verjamem, da smo lahko tudi v farmacevtski, biotehnološki panogi svetovni šampioni.
I strongly believe that if we can be the world champions in sport, the same world champions, we can be the same world champions in pharmaceuticals and biotechnology.
Že zdaj smo v regiji šampioni, ampak ni dovolj, da smo samo evropski prvaki, zakaj ne bi bili svetovni. In mislim, da nam bo ta podpis seveda pomagal pri tej ideji, Seveda pa moramo na eni strani vlada pripraviti kompleten ekosistem za to, da bodo lahko svetovni strokovnjaki prišli v Slovenijo.
Why would we only be European champions if we can be the world champions? And the same goes for the project at hand. That is why the government will need to set up a system in order for the project to work.
V bistvu moramo narediti samo eno stvar, vzpostaviti partnerstvo med državo, znanostjo in industrijo.
Actually, we need to do one thing, establish cooperation between and partnership between the state and the industry.
In tisto, kar je seveda najbolj pomembno in tudi na našem ministrstvu vsak dan razmišljamo, nadgraditi dosedanji model sofinanciranja razvojnih projektov in vseh podpornih ukrepov.
What we believe is the most important thing to do is to upgrade our system of co-financing and supporting the investments in the industry.
Verjamem, da nam lahko skupnimi močmi uspe in želim ne samo ideji, ampak tej strateškemu razmisleku v Sloveniji eno svetlo prihodnost.
I believe that together we can succeed. Allow me to conclude by wishing not only this idea, but a strategic focus to succeed in the future and come to a fruition.
In Robi, hvala ti za to idejo. Zdaj pa po protokolu vem, da se moram tamle usediti.
Robi, thank you so much for your initiative.
Torej, v tem trenutku prosim ministra, da v imenu vlade in gospoda Lolja, da v imenu zavoda Biologics tudi slavnostno podpišeta pismo o nameri, s katerim bosta potrdila, če pogledata še nekoliko za fotografe, tako, seveda podpišeta. Ja, kot poroka skoraj, da. Morda samo še, če ostanete in si podate roke. Prosila pa bom še vse ostale ustanovne partnerje, če se pridružite za tako imenovano družinsko sliko, da imamo še spomin, tako. Torej, predstavniki podjetja Novartis, Sandoz, Amchem Slovenija in Herman in partnerji. Aha, sorry. A bomo. Torej, hvala lepa vsem in čestitke vladi in Biologics za vse novinarje na voljo za izjave. So vsi partnerji v dvorani Zrak. Zdaj pa mi dovolite, da spet podam žogico na drugo stran dvorane, ko je z nami Jernej Pintar. Jernej, že imaš mikrofon? Ne še. Torej, čez 5 minut se začenja izjemno zanimiva okrogla miza. Jernej in odlični spikerji bojo z vami.
starting, yeah. Lahko? Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is a panel that's going to take a little bit of a different streak compared to the last one. We're going to talk about enabling technologies. My name is Jorna. I'm director of the main Slovenian Technology Park. Enabling technologies, first we have to pay homage to technology, of course. The thing is that every single piece of clothing that each of us here has was done by technology. Every bite of food that we take, even if you produce it at home, you use technology that was a state of the art at that time. The health and the discoveries of new drugs, of our hopes when we encounter new health problems. Technology is the one that is saving us. Mobility, you coming here on land, sea, water, keeping close to your family. Technology, whether we like it or not, is in every step that we take. And all the past waves of technology are the ones that made our lives good. Keep us connected, keep us together, keep us healthy, keep us secure, and so on. Technology, which was said in the previous panel, is what made Europe into Europe. Because in the Dark Ages, Europe was obscure. Nobody even noticed it. It was unimportant, a piece of map that was unimportant. Technology is what made Europe into Europe. Later on, United States. I don't know if you know, but the technology of automation is actually what made the United States in what they are today, and the front leader of technology. Later on, of course, we go forward to Japan, South Korea, and everyone else. And the latest, China. China had great and big population long time ago. But now it's important because now they are a technological superpower. Now they have not only industrial technology, now they also have high-tech supremacy. So we can recognize, very simple, that technology is the maker of greatness. Technology is the enabler of greatness. And that's why in this panel now, we will talk about the new waves of technology that are here today and how public and private organizations, which is just what Minister said right now, can make it happen. In order to do that, I invite to the stage Artane Rizvanoli, Minister of Economy of Kosovo, please. Hi. Eva McClellan, Country President, welcome, Country President and General Manager of Roche, Slovenia. Hi, Eva, very welcome. Dusan Lukic, Head of Innovation and Development Moon at Porsche, Slovenia. Hi. Boštjančič, the President of the Management Board at Telekom Slovenia. Very welcome. Julia Švarcova, Government Affairs and Public Policy Manager at Google. Hi, very welcome. And Andrew Caruana Galizia, Head of Europe and Eurasia at World Economic Forum. Hi, Andrew. All right. But before digging into the first question, we'll first go into one brilliant research that I saw that was made by Bloomberg. Please, the PowerPoint. It is, I took this photo. I hope, yeah, it's clear, because it was a photo, so I wasn't sure about this. I saw it at the conference about how we embrace technology. Bloomberg made an analysis all across the globe to see what are the attitudes. And because you don't see, I'll read it out, because it's quite small. All right, so the first pillar are the people that are embracing technology. Those are the ones that when something new comes out, they are among the first to grab the new types of technology. They will jump on new technology. Now, what's typical for them, they're usually C-level people in companies or in government. They very often come from tech industry, and usually they are the most educated. So there is, in the whole population, there's about 22% of these people, 22%. They know that when a technology comes out, they need to try it to segment which one is useful to them and which one is not. So usually these are people that jump on technology. Now the next pillar that we watch are the watchful. There is 41% of them. So the watchful are the ones that are waiting. They are waiting for the front runners to figure out which tech is good. And perhaps a bit more dangerously, they are waiting for the business case to be made. They are willing to adopt technology when the business case has been proven. Basically, that means that some other country has already made fortune with that technology, and now you're getting in. So you're a follower still, right? But they are still among the upper level, right? And then you come into the lower two, which is ambivalent. 28% of people are the ones that are quite fearful of technology. They do use technology, but they only reach out to consumer tech, headphones, telephone, perhaps very simple artificial intelligence. Never for anything else. These are the 28%. And then we have the fearful. The fearful is 9, almost 10%. These are the people that if you're waiting for consensus, if everyone will move into new tech, it's not going to happen. They never move, right? They are very afraid of technology. They are usually lower income, very conservative. In order to embrace technology, they are usually the ones that need to be told, you do this. For our company or for our government, you need to use this technology. And even then, if you see it, they will still avoid it. So this is the demographics of embracing technology. And we have to know only about 22% of the people are the ones that realize the importance of technology for all the waves that I was talking about earlier, Europe, United States, Japan, Korea, and so on, right? Only 22% of them. And that's why we're dealing with this today. So we're going to be focusing on embracing and the watchful. All right, no need for the PowerPoint anymore. Let's jump into the discussion. And so, my first question, and Andrew, as you were the last one that I invited on the stage, you're going to be the first one that I ask, is which modern technologies have changed, and how have this changed? Not only your organization, but the World Economic Forum sees the public, the private, the everything in between. Can you give us some concrete examples, please?
Things and sound smart. There were a couple of things before I answer your question that I found very, very provocative in a good way in your opening remarks. The first, the comment about the Dark Ages. So a very interesting thing about that period is that it wasn't necessarily, in terms of quality of life, worse than, say, the Renaissance or the 18th century or even the 19th century for most Europeans. What was very different about it was that it was an era of very small states, presumably very small businesses, so in many ways very decentralized, which meant high insecurity for certain people, but also a lot of freedom. And so I found this provocative because in Europe we often tend to view SMEs as sacred. There are others who view sort of large corporations as the ultimate end goal for any company. And I feel in Europe we just haven't been able to find a balance between sort of worshipping SMEs and wanting to almost maintain Europe as an economy of SMEs and large sort of hyperscalers on the other hand. And obviously, as with most things, we need both. For economic resilience, we need a very diverse economic model with a multitude of different companies experimenting, trying new things, but we also need the highly productive large companies. I mean, every single study shows that large companies in general are the most productive. They're able to invest, they're able to be the embracers of new technologies. The second thing in this methodology, I found it personally very interesting because I used to work for a government, so I feel I went from a low-income, conservative environment to an organization which embraces tech. So the World Economic Forum has about almost 1,000 partner companies. And we, in our own right, are a fairly large organization. And so we've embarked on our own learning journey. So instead of preaching and lecturing, when it comes to emerging technologies, in many cases we actually adopted them ourselves. And so we've deployed the use of AI across the organization. It's still experimental, but we use it to see if it can do our own jobs. So maybe a little short-sighted on our part as employees, but we see it as an important part of our own role to understand what other organizations are going through. When it comes to, say, augmented reality, the metaverse, we created our own version of it, also as a way of learning directly and helping our partner companies learn.
And now, can you say a bit more about that? You made your own metaverse.
Yes, it's called the Global Collaboration Village. So we partnered with Microsoft and we developed, so we often talk about Davos as a global village, at least when our annual meeting takes place. So we created a sort of miniature version of Davos in our own metaverse, with the idea being that it will allow us to democratize Davos, democratize that experience. It's actually quite a fun place to be in. So I was skeptical to begin with, but I tried it out myself, and it beats a virtual meeting. So if your alternatives are sort of Zoom, Teams, or Skype, or an augmented reality meeting, I would pick that any day. I would obviously prefer a physical meeting, but that's not always possible. And the applications of that are, you know, they're pretty endless. There are a lot of dangerous activities where even the training is dangerous. Doing that on the metaverse in a way allows you to create a digital version of your own life, where you can try out, I don't know, rescue missions, you know. I mean, this stuff has been used by astronauts for generations. But now it's increasingly being used by police forces, by militaries, by firefighters, and so on. And of course also by educators. When children were sort of locked up at home, the most effective forms of learning were through augmented reality rather than via conference calls. But to go back to your question, I'm not trying to slip out of answering it. We're quite far upstream when it comes to public-private cooperation, so we don't put deals together. What we do is help governments and the private sector cooperate in a pre-competitive phase. So, you know, coming from government, I've seen many examples of tenders that fail because they fail to identify the right problem, they fail to take into account what the private sector can actually deliver, and so on. So that's a sort of extreme version of public-private partnerships gone wrong. The other extreme version is obviously when there's favoritism, which is still the case in Europe. So where we come in is to create an upstream, transparent context for governments, business, and crucially experts to meet. So that there's actually the entire ecosystem represented. I suppose one good example relevant to this discussion is a GovTech center we launched in Berlin together with the federal government. So Germany isn't world famous for its tech adoption. If you ever try to pay by credit card in a shop anywhere in Germany, you would know that. So it was a very interesting example. So a government that still uses fax machines created this GovTech campus in Berlin, which approached us to internationalize its work. And this is interesting because it allows people in different parts of the German government, so it's a federal state, so people sitting in Berlin, people sitting at the state level, to collaborate in an informal setting. So we have this software called Atrium. It's essentially a digital platform. And we created a version for the German government that allows, say, someone sitting in a village in the south of Germany to engage directly with their colleagues sitting in the federal government in Berlin when it comes to adopting technologies for public services. There were, you know, every now and then there are high-profile scandals of I don't know, a hospital procuring an AI system that ends in failure at huge cost. So the idea is that we can have collaboration and use cases, and eventually also a reservoir of products that civil servants can actually procure, which have been pre-vetted and pre-approved. So that will ideally be the end goal, delivered via the GovTech campus in Berlin.
Did you find any correlation about how digitalized the public is versus the government or something, when you have projects like that?
So in Germany, in particular, the private sector is far ahead. But that's a really good question, because governments often, you know, they set the framework and then preach. You know, then the digital minister, for example, would go out and spread the gospel. The private sector needs to adopt these technologies at scale. But the government is half GDP in most European countries. So for me, the government has two very clear roles. Obviously, set an effective policy framework that could or could not include funds. And second, most important, play its role effectively as an economic player in its own right. Government should digitalize just as fast as the private sector. You know, the private sector obviously cannot set policy, cannot force government to digitalize. That has to come from political leadership.
Are you saying that in that table the government should be the embracer?
To an extent, because it's taxpayers' money. So you don't want your government. You know, I'm not sure I would want a government to create its own metaverse. We did that because it's our money. So it's very different. But should government adopt mature technologies? Absolutely. Yeah. At scale and as fast as the private sector. Yeah.
Excellent. So there is very strong correlation, actually. Brilliant.
There's also a strong correlation between digitalization of government and economic growth. But anyway, that's another bigger topic.
That's a key message for us.
Yeah.
So the previous panel with the ministers, we need to pass this on. So the level of digitalization of government directly translates into growth.
Yes, I mean, it's chicken and egg, you know. It's hard to isolate what came first, but it obviously doesn't hurt.
All right,
yeah.
Brilliant. Google. I didn't know you guys were the sponsors of this, but I have to say that I think everybody in the audience, we got a bit spoiled by Google because you gave us everything in the last 20 years, right? The mailboxes, the navigation, now the AI, everything's just coming out, and we use it for free, of course, right? So how did the new tech change Google, since you're such a huge global case? What's going on?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here today, and beautiful Bled, and on this very distinguished panel. I think I will not surprise anyone here when I say that from Google's perspective, digital adoption with AI at the forefront of it is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for economic growth and for competitiveness, and also, of course, for us as a company. I don't think there is any other technology that has as much potential to address some of the key issues and opportunities that businesses are facing, but also that governments and the broader societies are facing. Of course, there are many examples of how AI can help, be that businesses or governments cut costs or address some of their own issues or help with scientific breakthroughs. But from our perspective, AI, of course, is helping us achieve our core mission. And you would have seen AI in our products for more than a decade. It has been helping us make some of the most widely used products like search or like maps much more helpful in maps. It's helping users find more efficient, faster commutes in Google Translate. It's helping users be more effective in learning or understanding other languages. In Gmail, it's helping users protect from viruses, from spam, but also helping you draft your emails. So we have been leveraging the potential of this technology in our products for a long time now. And we're very excited about what's yet to come, especially with latest advancements in AI technology and in generative AI. If I just look at the way that we provide our products, or that our products are helpful for businesses, and the way that we work with businesses, since that's also something that we've talked about before. We look at AI and how it can help in this space from many different perspectives. If you look at small and medium-sized businesses, AI has a huge potential to be a game changer in terms of how they can stay competitive on the market. Of course, small and medium-sized businesses often have a lot less resources than larger companies, but AI can make their processes more efficient. It can help with sometimes mundane tasks, and it can save time for more strategic or more creatively fulfilling work. Similarly, our Gemini tools, our large language models tools, can help with brainstorming, be that on the creative content side or on the strategic side. I know that I use Gemini very frequently when I want to kickstart a thought process, be that for a strategy or presentation, any sort of work document, or a difficult email. And then last but not least, I think, and this is very important in some of our key products for businesses like Google Ads, which are used by small and big businesses alike. The latest AI technologies have a huge potential to help make decision-making much more data-driven, evidence-based, and more informed, which again can cut costs and make decisions much more effective. But that's of course all on the product side, or how we use the technology in-house and how we translate it into the products. But beyond that, I think, and we are investing a lot into this as well, but others are too. AI has huge potential for progress and for opportunities that are broadly beneficial for the society. Now that can be in helping governments do their everyday work, like I mentioned, or in strengthening their own cyber resilience. For instance, we have seen that, of course, especially in the last couple of years, that cyber resilience is more important than ever. That's, of course, at national as well as a local level. It can help with making public administration more efficient, which can cut costs, which tends to be good for citizens. But I'll defer to my colleague on data there. But of course, and I think this is one of the very exciting areas, AI and some of the products that we are developing in this space have a huge potential to help with one of the key issues that we are facing, which is huge economic consequences, and that's immediate impact of climate change. Now, just for example, we have some crisis response tools that can help governments in this area. For example, Flood Hub. This is our platform that uses AI technology to forecast floods in high-risk areas across many different countries at this point, including here in Slovenia, which can help tremendously with preparedness and response. Similarly, to an extent, we are using AI technology for tracking and informing on wildfires in our maps and Google search products. That's on the response side. But we also have many different smaller projects that focus on proactive measures, like Project Greenlight, which is, again, using AI, surprisingly, to help predict traffic patterns and make recommendations for city planning officials on cutting traffic emissions. So those are just some of the examples. I haven't even waded into all the scientific and medicinal breakthroughs that we have already seen, and I think we can see a lot more of in the coming years. But in short, the potential is huge from our perspective, and we are investing a lot into working on it on our side, but also working with governments in helping bring businesses and citizens on board, be that via upskilling programs or funding, or with our local partners in the region, in Europe or in different countries on different upskilling programs. I think this is something that we all in the public and private sector really have to work together on if we want to reap the benefits.
I'll be a bit provocative.
Go ahead.
You take two historical facts together. One, when pocket calculator was invented, everybody said this is the end of science. Seriously, perhaps you don't know that, but they doomed the world when pocket calculator, nobody will know any mathematics. The real response was the explosion of science, not the death of science, but the explosion of science, right? And when AI comes into the game, we also have to know that it has very different characteristics than any other previous industrial revolutions, right? All past industrial revolutions were kicking the bottom of the pyramid. AI is the first one to go after doctors, lawyers, governments, business, right? Goes into the top level of added value. From the eyes of Google, and I'm sure you precisely know that this is a huge value add chain, what's happening in the market, right? What would you say, you were talking about smaller companies and governments like ours. How can we respond to that? What can we do? Everybody's afraid that AI will kill the people, like pocket calculator, right? Everything will end. Actually, it's going to be an explosion, right? How do you view this?
Well, I think there are two sides to this coin. One, and that's fully understandable, that people, governments, businesses have reservations or potentially are even scared. And there is a responsibility on the part of tech platforms like ours, public sector stakeholders, civil society organizations, NGOs, to really look at the potential risks and try to address them as best as you can. And I think in the past couple of years, certainly, but of course, work has been going on this for much longer. We've really seen a lot of focus internationally, but especially here in Europe, on addressing the risks and trying to regulate for those risks. And I mean, we were one of the first, if not the first company that said, I think publicly back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, that AI is too important not to be regulated and too important not to be regulated well. So we have participated very actively in this process and worked with many different stakeholders, including EU institutions and national governments here in Europe, and the various international fora that have been focused on the technology. But I think, and I'm sure most of you know very well that we just recently had the AI Act adopted here in Europe, and we're looking at its implementation. But I think the other side of the coin here, and I think this is an area that we should be focusing on a little bit more, to be honest, is promoting the benefits of AI, because they are really tremendous. I mean, I believe that, and I do believe that many in governments and in academia, in the civil society, see those benefits as well, but sometimes they can fall back in these conversations, because of course the risks and some of the worries about the potential of how far this technology can go are quite sensational, so they draw a lot more attention. But I think even when we're focused on regulating and mitigating the risks as much as possible, we need to make sure that there's enough space left for innovation, and for that innovation to happen here in Europe as well. That's very important, so that we don't miss out on the benefits, on the economic benefits and the societal benefits.
Okay. Minister Arteng, Kosovo is known for high digital ambitions. I know here in Slovenia we often talk about the digital literacy of Kosovars. How did you manage to do that? Which technologies are you embracing in your government? From what Andrew said, that government needs to be the first mover in some cases. How did you manage to do that, and how did you get the population to follow?
Thanks for the question. I think it's safe to say here that, as opposed to private sector, we in government like to stick to more mature, proven technologies. But yes, in Kosovo, we are the first in the region with regard to broadband internet access, and one of the top 8 countries in Europe, alongside Switzerland and Nordic countries with regard to broadband coverage. The way we achieved this is actually through very targeted, purposeful interventions by providing matching grants for the private sector to invest in coverage in areas in small towns or villages or remote ones where it was not economically feasible for them to do so on their own. So this way we managed last year to connect the last village in Kosovo to internet, and now 100% of settlements are covered by broadband internet. And it's actually not just that, but according to surveys, the percentage of population that uses internet varies between 97 and 98% in recent years. Now, of course, access is one thing. Having a young population is another thing. I think socioeconomically and demographically, I think our large diaspora also had a role in this. Because it was quite a huge incentive to get in touch with families, to get connected, etc., particularly when internet was first introduced in the country. But moving forward, having access to this infrastructure and making sure that everyone has access to it is actually something that is very important and the basis in wanting to use any modern technology. Now, from a government perspective, making sure that everyone, regardless of where they are located in the country or regardless of socioeconomic background, have access to the same technology and affordably so, is extremely important and is becoming more so as time goes by. Having access to technology during the pandemic, for instance, was something that was vital, and actually having this kind of broadband access across country was something that was very useful. Now, how do you get the people to follow and embrace it? In our case, I think, and I was thinking about this actually as I was coming here preparing for this panel, I think the fact that we digitalized several services in recent years, right now we have over 175 public services that are provided digitally to citizens, but it was not only that, because you can try to provide the services, but if there's no interest, if people are not going to make an effort to go and register and go through the process, then it really doesn't help. But I think in our case, we didn't let the crisis go to waste. In the case of the pandemic, for instance, we were the last country in Europe to actually get access to vaccines, but then within 3 months we reached a record vaccination rate because the process was organized digitally. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you can digitalize everything and the technology will do it for you. There was a lot of logistics also behind it, but the fact that people had to register, to set up an appointment, and everything went smoothly, and which was particularly important in the time of a pandemic, of course, because you didn't want to have queues and large groups of people at the same place. Then the energy crisis, when the energy crisis hit, we developed energy efficiency subsidies, and these were also administered online, fully online, which meant that we could reach, so in the first case, over 1 million citizens with vaccines in a few months. In the case of the energy crisis, around 10 to 25,000 families a year in the last years. And having these kind of services that were very important to the public at the time meant that people had an incentive to go and register and to start using the platform. So then what we saw is that actually people started using the platform more, even for other services, but also other ministries across government or other institutions across government started adopting the same approaches and mechanisms to other services. For instance, one of the largest ones today is the 2nd of September. So it's the start of the school year, both in Kosovo and in Slovenia. Apart from traffic going back to being a mess, that also means that we had to subsidize. For years now, we subsidize for primary school all school books and school materials for children, again, in an effort to have a more equitable society. And this, following suit for the measures that we have for energy efficiency, the Ministry of Education then adopted a similar mechanism to have this subsidy online and reach over 120,000 students that were subsidized electronically. And this all means that not only is the process more transparent, and it is more streamlined, and it would certainly be impossible without it to do it, particularly in such a short time, but also it means a lot more than that, because having that kind of transparency and objectivity in the process, when the criteria are all automatically checked and the citizen gets the response immediately and they know exactly what's going on with their application, etc. This has meant that also trust in government increases, which is one of the things that I love most about it. And of course, particularly in the Balkans, this is something that is not always easy to do. Even if you do everything right, if something goes wrong, if one person has a bad experience, they will immediately jump to the conclusion that there is corruption or funny business going on. But this way, when everyone knows that it's so clean, clear, transparent, then it helps to increase trust in government, trust in institutions, and trust in society, I think, ultimately, which is something very important.
Also trust in technology in that case, right?
Yes. I mean, the fact that don't mean to sound too much like a government here, but maybe, in fact, in Kosovo, certainly, we have trust in technology. And I think, in fact, people tend to see less the risks of it. But this is why we are working on one hand on digital literacy, but on the other hand, strengthening cybersecurity capacities and along with legal framework in the country.
Excellent, thank you very much. Boštjan, Telekom Slovenia. new tech, which ones do you use? How has it changed the company or your clientele?
Yeah, maybe to start with history, what changed our industry most was, of course, internet. In '95, like 80–90% of our revenue was generated from telephony, plain old telephony, twisted pairs telephony based, and that was a very simple business. And its transformation, which happened, resulted that today we are getting some few percentages still from these old services. Everything else is coming from of course, from other services, but transformation was several-fold. It was technology, of course, which was changing all the time, developing all the time, which we had to take pace with it. It was infrastructure. The whole infrastructure changed very substantially from twisted copper pair to fiber optics mainly, and to high technology wireless connections. And of course, it was introduced also competition. Competition was something that drove the whole environment in completely different direction. And in similar way, we see today artificial intelligence. So we believe that artificial intelligence will do still similar transformation in our industry, most likely in all the other industries. But maybe replying directly to your questions, where are we there already? One example is that typical form of human communication is speech. And our TV service, based on that idea, is now based on communicating with speech. So you provide orders to your TV set-top box on what you want to see, what you want, where you want to go today with your TV set. You do it by voice. And this is done by mostly, or I would say almost every day, by 75% of our customers. And they generate daily like 500,000 or even more requests, different requests, what they want to see, they want to change the channel and so on. But at the end, this is the example how artificial intelligence, which is behind, of course, making machines understand Slovene, behind of it is artificial intelligence, how making it into something which is tangible benefit. And it is for us very important because it provides us in a certain way, it encourages us. I mean, we started this very early. It was not the large language model which was behind, but it was based on artificial intelligence and provided us a great incentive to continue in this way, meaning services, implementing services which are useful for customers. So to put it in one word, as enabling technology, as main enabling technology, which we see for future and transformative, that has transformative capacity in telecommunication, is artificial intelligence. But we engage also in other technologies, for example, on quantum mechanics. We are using quantum communications for, idea is actually protecting security. I have no idea how it works, I cannot explain. It is something related to entanglement, but here I would stop. But it's interesting that we already now can do on 60–70 kilometer distances quantum communication, which provides very high, it's very, very reliable in the sense that you cannot tamper with communication. So you can see if somebody tampers with these specific communications, and security is, of course, something that will be very important also in future. And there we again see technologies are not so important. Actually, ideas and implementations about technologies are very important. This is the crucial part.
Thank you. Eva, coming to you. Global company making cures and treatments for uncurable things, long development processes and everything. How has new tech influenced that?
Yeah, thank you so much. I have to say, the audience, you know, kudos to you, because it is like 6:30. You've probably been here all day. I was in the seats just about in the last panel for 90 minutes. So yeah, kudos to you to stay awake. And I encourage you to think about, you know, what the type of technologies in healthcare have helped you, because that's really where I come from. And maybe two comments before I go into the technologies that have advanced. One comment, I think there's technologies that are you can do possible things, like build the metaverse, which is fantastic. And it's probably those high adopters, those really well-educated people that really want to, you know, have a lot of fun with this new technology. And then there's other technologies that are just needed day to day and you know, are really meaningful. And that's what motivated me to get into the industry that I'm in. I'm a scientist by background. And when I was studying, so I'll go with the story. I'm going off script here just for the entertainment value. But, you know, when I was studying, insulin was not available on the masses. Banting and Best at the University of Toronto in the 70s had to stimulate the pancreas ducts of dogs and then secrete the insulin and then give it to only the very few kids or adults that have diabetes. And then the technology that really fascinated me was the ability to have recombinant insulin, exogenous insulin made outside of the body, not having to have an organism produce it outside and give it to the masses. Which brings me to your point around technology is available everywhere, but it's not evenly distributed. So where I get fascinated is technologies that allow you to accelerate the production of things that are super meaningful for human life and health, and therefore then could be distributed to as many people as possible so they could all have access. So the inspiring thing about giving access to books and electronics so everybody has access to education was really inspiring to me. Then fast forward 2003, I was sitting in the convocation hall, a biotechnology or biology class. The human genome sequence was complete. I don't know if you remember, the human genome sequence was complete. The Human Genome Project, 2003, that's 21 years ago. Fantastic. Now we have the DNA of the human genome. I just thought this is insane. We're going to be able to cure cancer because what happens with cancer is you have errors in your genes, right? And they replicate really fast. So if you can understand the human genome, you can have the technology then to build that. I think we're at another watershed moment, which brings me to the technology we are focused on right now and we're leaders in, but probably not for very long, and I hope for not very long, because I want other people to be leaders in it so that we can democratize access, is generative AI and machine learning as it relates to R&D productivity. Because now that we have access to the human genome, we can start feeding these large language models, and we're purchasing many companies that are ahead in this space. We purchased one in 2021, and we collaborate with them to do a lab in a loop. What that means is it takes 10 years to do R&D. 9 out of 10 fail. So your odds of succeeding is 1 out of 9. And the cost, both the amount of animals you have to use, the people you have to put in clinical trials, the timelines it takes is huge. We can now, with large language models, with the human genome sequence for the last 21 years, with generative AI and lab in a loop, we can start reducing the amount of time and energy it takes for R&D, and I'm so excited about that because in the next couple of years, we're going to start seeing the next leapfrog in medicine and accessibility to people. So I think I'll probably stop there. Roche is, number one there, and I want to say something else because we always talk about North America. I'm Canadian, but I have European roots, and we've kind of lived half here and half there. We always talk about, the United States and China and where all this technology is coming from. I mean, the chief scientist officer from OpenAI is Albanian. She's the number 2 to Sam Altman. There are many wonderful talents in this region, many of them who have obviously gone to the United States and elsewhere. And my hope is that, with this kind of excitement around meaningful technologies, we can start bringing some of the hubs back here into this region and also make it accessible for people.
I hope I'm not asking too detailed a question, but you said it to really reduce the R&D cycles, the amount of time, animals, human trials. Do you have any data on how much? Approximation? How much? What's the effect?
It depends. It depends on the type of disease you're studying, because some diseases like cancer, every single body is so different. And so I think it's tomato. Some would say 30, some will say 50. Ambitious people will say even more. But I think what's really interesting is a personalized cancer vaccine. Because currently, the way that we're treating cancer, we started treating cancer with chemotherapy. I mean, that's really just, indiscriminatory. It's not personalized at all. Then we had personalized cancer, monoclonal antibodies, kind of looking at targets. But to be honest with you, that's still kind of shooting in the dark. What's really exciting, actually, is to personalize, just like you would to a virus, a vaccine for your specific human cancer. And then you can imagine if we can, but that will have to get down to 9 months, because no one's going to wait 9 years for a personalized cancer. They're going to have the 9 months. So if we can get cancer research to the same time frame that we're getting vaccine research, and we saw that during pandemic be cut by 2 or 3, that I think would be kind of a step change. The timelines, if we get 50% less or 30% less, I think that's interesting, but it's not really a step change. Personalized cancer vaccine is kind of where we're going, and I'm really excited about it.
Brilliant, sounds great. Dusan, Porsche, completely different story. What's the status of new technologies? I mean, the cars are becoming a platform, so you must be flooded with new tech.
Yes and no. And, you know, if somebody would look at our company, at Porsche Slovenia, and say, what the hell do they have to do with the technology? We've existed in Slovenia for 30 plus years, and for like 26, 27 of them, we were just importer of cars. Mm-hmm. You want to buy Volkswagen or Audi, we import it, our dealer sells it, that's it. But then, now, there came some changes in technology. Electric cars, that was the first one. And of course, what we are always doing when some new technology comes, we try to think, what can we do with it? For us as a company and for our clients and, you know, together. And when electric cars came, we could just sell them. We could basically just sell them and, you know, they would drive them out of the showroom, probably wouldn't know our clients how to charge them and so on and so on. Wouldn't be a brilliant customer experience. So it's okay, maybe we could do something about it. What can we do? We can use some digital services to enable charging on the road. We can sell them chargers for home, which we can also connect to some kind of backend. So we have all this data about what is happening and then React connected to it. And then we said, okay, if they are charging, maybe they need energy for it. And we ended up in green energy, solar power plants. We ended up in energy management for the buildings. We ended up in you know, grid regulation. So it kind of grew from there. And that meant, in the end, that we as a company had to change a lot. Because actually, when you're talking about adopting technology, it's some technologies are easier to adopt than others. AI is a good example because everybody can kind of try it a little bit. It doesn't cost you a lot of time. It doesn't cost you a lot of money if you're a private person or if you are a company. It's quite easy actually to find some use for yourself. On the other hand, you have a car, electric car. I mean, for most of the world, the car is the second biggest investment after your home. Mm-hmm. And to just say somebody will buy like a 30,000, 40,000 euro car just to see how electric goes, it doesn't work that way. So we realized you have to communicate and you have to educate. And not just people. We had to educate ourselves. We had to educate our network about which technologies are these, how to use them. Because just putting a technology in car doesn't really work. I mean, Boštjan has said that 75% of their set-top boxes, users of set-top boxes, use voice commands. Mm-hmm. Cars had voice commands way before their set-top boxes had voice commands, and we can only dream about 75% of users using voice commands in cars, which would be the safest way, the easiest way, no buttons, no touch screens, you just say what you want, and the cars understand it. I mean, you know, some cars use Google technology, some cars use other technology, but if you say, I don't know, my Volkswagen, I'm cold, it will raise the heat, but people don't use it. But on the other hand, for example, I know that they also have, because I'm their user, they have an app, which is not that much used. Our cars also have apps through which you can control them. 70–80% of users install this app even before receiving the car. So, but why? Because we taught our sales network what this technology is, what it can do, what is good about it for the end customer. They show it to the end customer, and then it gets adopted. And it's the same with our energy management systems, which are actually a quite good example about how to not go about trying to get public adopted technology. Mm-hmm. Right now, we had this problem with high prices of electricity. Now in Slovenia, the grid fee that everybody pays for using the grid is changing, and it's much more important about what, not how much electricity you use, but what power peaks do you do. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, when this change, what is the consequence of using too much peak power? You will pay much, much more. Mm-hmm. And for the last, I don't know, year and a half that this was debated, nobody was actually debating about why is it so important not to do that, how as a company or as a private person you can avoid doing it with technology. It was just the stick, no carrots, no explanations. And then, of course, now if you talk about it, and even if you present a piece of technology that would solve this problem, box, cloud service that controls all your devices and watches out when the car is not charging at the same time as you are cooking, because nobody will not want to cook when they get home and want lunch, but the car can wait. Even if you offer this to the market, what does the market say? Oh, you're trying, they are making electricity more expensive, and now you're also trying to make money out of us because we have now to buy this, you bastards, and so on. So the big problem actually is when new piece of technology comes, and AI is a great example, because, as I said, it's easy to try, for companies to first analyze themselves, of course, to see when they can use it for themselves, but it's much more important than to see how you can build up a viable business case out of it. So do something that makes some profit for you and is wanted by the customer. Otherwise, you go down. I mean, electric cars, we know if we would just start selling, as I said in the beginning, electric cars, what do our dealers and service network live off? Service. Changing oil, changing this, changing that. With electric cars, there is no changing oil. So, okay, now, 5%, 10% of cars sold, 15 in Norway now, 95, but still, sold are electric. But the fleet of the cars on the road is still electric, is still quite small. But you have to know that, for example, some kind of service network for cars operates with, I don't know, 10, 15% margin. So if you take away 30% of their business by electric cars, they're underwater. So if we want our ecosystem of us, our dealers, our service network to survive, we have to find something to replace it. So, okay, we have electric cars, we have green energy, energy management. How can we combine all of this to enable all of us to survive? I mean, we will survive, but the dealer network is different. And, of course, put it into something that people will want and not feel forced to use it. Mm-hmm. Because most of the technologies new that failed because people felt that they were forced to using and they were cheated into using it, and there was no money for them, no benefit in it. And we don't want that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So basically, what you said is that it completely transformed you from a car company, and also you, from what you've been saying, into an energy expert, right? I mean, now you're an energy and home expert, yeah. Right?
Let me put it this way. What I'm working on now as a head of innovation and development for this stuff didn't exist 4 years ago. 5 years ago, I didn't even work for Porsche Slovenia. I was still a journalist. Mm-hmm. But then, as fortunately, the company realized very early that these changes that are coming, so electrification, basically software-defined cars, AI that will come into them, that this will be as big as a step as it was from horse-drawn carriages to cars, when Henry Ford started, producing cheap cars. We started working on them on this years ago. So basically, right now in Slovenia, last year, I think the sales of electric cars were about 8%. This year is 5.5%. Maybe now it will be a little better. The subsidies are higher. But even with that small amount of electric cars sold, we basically can say, yeah, we can leverage all these new technologies for something for our users that will get a whole package and will feel a benefit of this package. So we had to transform ourselves. Otherwise, in the end, who says? Maybe if not, maybe we would have our own Kodak or Nokia moment.
Dusan, you took me on a completely new path now, but I love it. I'm going to take it. What you're saying is that Porsche has transformed from this new tech into completely new know-how that you have to conquer, new sets of skills, actually new market, home market in electricity and energetics. And if I connect that with what you've been saying, search versus AI search and everything, and what you've been saying into R&D, It means that the companies are restructuring not a bit, but fundamentally. And if the companies are doing that, it basically means that in the next step, also the countries will need to do the same.
Yeah.
We need to learn from that, right? So basically what we need is what Minister said, we need really strong partnerships where we can learn from you and be fast enough to be in the first two quadrants, right? The embracers and the watchful. So my question to all of you now would be, how would you advise to have the partnership with governments, any governments, with civil society, based on what you can offer, because I'm sure that all of you also want to improve the ecosystems where you work.
I will just add something before this. You said governments, states also have to, reorganize. That doesn't just mean, I think, reorganizing as internal reorganization.
Yeah.
You have to change your mindset. You have to reorganize your, let's call it knowledge base or learning experience. Not just reorganization as let's have a new ministry or a new agency and everything is solved. The whole mindset has to change.
Yeah. All right. So let's go that way. Boštjan, would you be the first to? How can the government cooperate with you? How, not only Slovenia, and of course I know you're very present also in Kosovo, for example, right, and many other countries. What's the best way for governments to learn from you and use your skills and know-how?
I think this is a bi-directional process for sure, but mainly where sometimes companies differ from governments are objectives, clearance of objectives. Because we have very clear objectives, whereas countries, for example, for Slovenia, we had a very simple path in some way. We were in Yugoslavia, we wanted independence, we wanted to get into European Union, we wanted to get, but this was not so clear, but we wanted to get into NATO, and all these objectives were fulfilled. But what is next? And similar problem is also with European Union. What is next? What is the objective? What is the final objective? And likely, yes, from company perspective, we want to enable our employees and customers to live better, obviously, and we want to work better, and we want to improve our results for whatever that is. Revenue and all the other elements that we have as results. And we have a plan under which we have to do it, and we have all the constraints how to do it, which limit us in this direction, and that's the system. And I think in Slovenia, in European Union, we need likely new set of objectives, because as we heard today, some other countries have very clear objectives, and Europe, in this sense, needs clear objectives. And I think at the end, it is like this. We want to live better. We want to preserve our values, which is democracy, freedom of movement, and we want to live and work better. And if we embed this, and we have enabling technology, which is likely, as it seems, artificial intelligence. But one of the important things is related also to this cancer cure developments. Question is, whereas we will use AI to try to fill gaps into processes, or we will change the whole processes to adapt it to the artificial intelligence, because this was done in medical research and also in education potentially. So you throw everything that you have done for years because you have certain limitations which you don't have anymore, and you change everything and you start from new. And I think this thinking big is very important. And I think AI is very available and accessible way of doing it. So we have this opportunity and we have to use it. Everybody else is going to use it, and European Union has to set objectives around this and preserving core values that we have, including security, which again can be largely improved with use of this technology.
I love the fact that you said we need to get together, unify, right? Have a clear objective, get behind one target, which also means we need pallbearers. We need people who are in front of this and saying, hey guys, this is what we need high tech in this direction. And you guys are the critical infrastructure in every country, right?
We are just critical.
It's your natural role.
We are enablers, but at the end, unfortunately, we want to become more, but we are mostly enablers. There are others who use from Google on, who use infrastructure that we produce and maintain for providing services. We are very important enabler, we are critical infrastructure, but we are enabler. So the whole ecosystem would have to be more in balance, likely in future. That is also important because you need a very good enabler. And there are different ideas how these enablers will survive into the future, who's going to prevail. I don't think anybody's going to prevail. It's a complete ecosystem which will have to work towards a certain goal. And this goal, I think, it is better life. It's better life, it's better technology that supports better life. And new ideas. And of course, I think and I see also with artificial intelligence that there is a very silent majority, even in Kosovo, for example, young people. Young people will have to raise their voices and they will have to take the lead. Maybe we can set the objectives, but how we will get there likely will land very much in hands of them. And I think this is okay. I see it as a huge advantage of Kosovo also, as a very young society, as a very vibrant society. It's a very interesting society in several ways. It's something that is very nice to see. I think this is the direction where we have to go. And we can be optimistic regardless of all the facts that we are facing today.
Okay. Eva, across the world, Roche cooperates with many governments. You have many cases. From what I heard, you're very good in countries like Estonia, right? That there's a lot of trust, which was mentioned earlier by the minister. What would be your ideal case of working with governments? What can you offer to develop the society? What would be your advice?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, look, not just Estonia. I've worked across 4 different countries in the last 16 years for Roche: Canada, Brussels, Belgium, Switzerland, now in Slovenia, and definitely talked to all my colleagues around private-public partnerships. Well, I think for Roche specifically, and then I will give you 2 examples, I think it's a mindset. It is still very societally oriented, and you don't believe it until you're really day in, day out there. If we are going to provide a product to society and extract value, which in most European countries is taxpayers' money, healthcare is taxpayers' money, we have a duty and a responsibility to therefore help develop society. It's a contract because society will not keep you around for the long term, and Roche has been around for 5 generations.
Not sure if you understood this. What she just said is that if you are allowed to work in one country, you are liable to develop the society.
To help develop the society, because you are producing something, but you're also extracting value for it. And I think that's like number 1. But 2 things. The 4 countries that I've worked in, so my personal experience, and I obviously have anecdotal things. You really cannot, and my colleague said this, you really cannot press something on someone. You cannot push something on someone. But you have to really be curious about each country. It's like a petri dish, back to my science day. It's like a petri dish. It depends on the country what can grow in there. So you really have to be a diagnostician when you come in. You can't just come in with your ideas, your visions, this is how we're going to go. But you have to understand what is unique in this country. Is it talent? Is it a specific industry? Is it a specific approach? And then you go from there. So if you want to be an ecosystem leader, you're really a cultivator of the garden that already exists there. Because the soil in one country versus the other country are going to be different, whether it's politically different or capability different, size matters. Size could be an advantage, but could also be a drawback in terms of capability. So you can't overpromise and underdeliver. So you really need to look at each country. Canada, for example, is really advanced in AI. The grandfather of AI is at the University of Toronto. The 3 universities are way ahead. I mean, BlackBerry was developed in Toronto. We didn't cultivate that because we fell asleep at the wheel. But nevertheless, the capabilities are there. In Belgium, there's a really big incentive. They have the highest number of IPs. And the highest number of patents because they have a really good environment for patent and innovation. Slovenia has the highest number of PhDs per capita. You have traditionally one of the best primary care systems. Again, you're falling asleep at the wheel, but you have that capability there. You also have world-renowned pediatric and cardiovascular system. You know, so you got to look for these things in countries, and then all of that stuff is built around trust. So the Nordics have a natural advantage of trust. So, for example, in Finland, 95% of the population, only about, you know, they have 5.5 million or something like that, only like 250,000 people do not give their data to the National Health Data Bank.
Here it's vice versa?
I don't know the numbers here because you have electronic health records, but they're not structured in a way that would be useful. So I think Slovenia, like with everything, is a bit in the middle. So I think it's a very decisive...
Let's edit that part from the camera.
There's a very decisive moment for Slovenia. So to see how I go country by country and start to understand what are the unique and differentiated opportunities. So that's number one. And then you co-create a vision. So you figure out what the country already wants, what wants to emerge, and if you really deeply listen, and we did this actually, we have a little paper that we wrote about it about a year ago in terms of what we found out, where the natural strengths of Slovenia are, and then you find people that can help you and you can help them, back to enablers. You're not really leading, you're enabling, and you help them cultivate that. And then the second thing is amplifying impact. So it's not, when you're inviting partners to the table, and this may be a little controversial, but from my limited experience, you may have more, I find this to be a truth. You have to be really selective about the partners you bring in, because sometimes people get very excited, they all come, but the more people that come, the harder it is to coordinate. So really important to understand what are the skills and capabilities authentically each partner can bring to the table, and being honest with yourself what you have. So Roche has technology, obviously, our experience with digitization and technology. We also have capability in internal transformation. So one of the things we did, back to internal reorg, you're right. You have to completely reorg for a new world. One of the things we did was we introduced a big investment in digitization, but we didn't digitize old processes. We transformed the processes. So making a bad process faster is no bueno, you know? So you really need to be thinking about it from an architecture perspective. That was a 6 to 7 year journey. We're still on it, and you know, we're almost there. We have our own internal chat GTP to help us be more effective, to help us be more, to spend more tasks on strategic things, and we encourage people to use it. And the second thing is, if you want to partner with people, you have to look at your sales structure. So we removed, it was a very bold move. I'm very proud of it. We removed the sales force from all countries in Roche, and we replaced them with partnerships, and we're no longer incentivize our field force on sales. That was a bold move, but you have to look at your incentives, because if you're really there truly to create value and capture that value, you're still getting a profit and a revenue, but it's not just pushing one way. And that's a bold move. You have to really decide whether that's the direction you want to go. But our experience is when you go in that direction, you meet with people, you create value together, and guess what happens? The pie gets bigger, you capture more value together. So you can't just be a leech in the system. You need to be a creator of value, and then you need to obviously smartly capture that value together. It's a very complicated process. You have to really commit to it. As you can tell, they start hiring leaders who are passionate about it. So then you have to select for leaders who believe in this kind of way of operating. And yeah, roll the dice that this is the way to go, and so far, so good.
It sounds that this reorganization has made Roche into a brilliant partner for governments to work together. In this way, it sounds, you know, it's not the sales that does the relationships and everything.
We're still a profitable company, always will be, but that's not the primary driver.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you. Kosovo, the other side of the picture. How do you make good partnerships with private companies? So the other part of the mirror that Eva was just talking about.
Before I move on to that, as an economist, one of the facts that we observed in recent years is that this thriving tech sector has not brought about the productivity in the economies, in developed economies, that we were expecting. And the main reason behind this appears to be that traditional sectors, be it manufacturing or services or governments, are not digitalizing, are not making use of these new technologies. So that's always very important to bear in mind, and why I'm saying this in this context particularly. I think in order for the successful partnership, I think you're absolutely right. The context and the timing and the objectives need to be aligned. When you have the same policy objective on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have the private sector can provide the tools to enable achieving that, that creates fertile ground for this cooperation. And that can be in several ways. One is simply you need the data, the information for policy making. And again, to quote you, in a way that is structured to be useful, I think is the word that you used. The other thing is what is actually possible, and here the private sector's input is very important. Often we are not aware of what is actually possible, but also just being part of that awareness raising and creating the tools to actually be able to achieve those policy objectives. Now, if I go back to demand management in electricity, for instance, technology is key here, but not just technology, but actually having someone who markets it, and usually private sector tends to be better at that than governments, who markets these solutions for you in a way to a joint benefit and objective, so that customers know what's in it for them, means that we can achieve, in this case, better align electricity consumption to production, and the consumer pays a lower price. They are aware of it, and they become part of the bigger solution, which ultimately is not just energy, but also fighting climate change in this case.
Excellent. Just a short notification before we started, because there was a signing earlier. We made a deal with the organizers that since we started a bit later, and we're the last panel, and it's the private, we have a lot of companies here, right? It's the private view. We will take it a bit further. So by intention, it's not by accident. We'll go for another, let's say, 8-10 minutes. I hope that's okay with you, right? It's planned, no worries, it's not chaotic, no worries. Dusan, your case, what can governments learn from you? What can you offer to improve the society? How can they work with you?
I mean, it's easy to work with us, but the problem with governments, the problem with all regulators, let's call it this way, is that they tend not to look at things holistically. You know, if we go into grid management, grid demand and supply management, we can do it technologically. You pick a little bit of new technology here, a little bit of new technology there, a little bit of old technology there, combined into a good business model that customer can understand. Usually there is a ministry, if you're talking about state for energy or something, which is really excited about it, because usually there is maybe even a grid management company that is also excited about it. Why? Because it makes it easier for them. They have to invest less, actually, in the hardware. But then you will always find another ministry, another agency that says, well, yeah, but, you know, from our perspective, I don't know, tax, whatever, this has not been this way. It is always done this way. You cannot do this. We don't know how to regulate this. And this, I think, is the biggest problem. Even if you go into regular public-private partnerships, there are a lot of tries or a lot of ideas, and then the companies, the private sector, just steps away and says, this is way too complicated, we are not going to do it. Or even another way, I mean, I've talked to a lot of municipalities in Slovenia. We were talking about, you know, green energy, investing into solar power plants, and I inadvertently said public-private partnership, and they went like, no, anything but this is way too complicated. It would take too much time, we would take on extra people, extra costs. So basically, we, as a private part, and of course the research organizations, the educational organizations within a country that we didn't mention but are also extremely important, we are there to produce new technology and combine it into some viable business models that are good for everybody. I think on the state side, they just have to think about how to make it easier to achieve it. Because if you don't make it easy, you will push away SMEs that you were mentioning that are really important in Europe, and even bigger companies, and basically all the companies that have developed kind of internal and external compliance, governance, and so on, and try to act responsibly. And you will only attract, you know, these small startups that are not afraid to go over the line, to go into gray and black area, which usually ends up on the news as they have cheated, they have failed. So what we need on the state side, on the EU side, is to be flexible enough on regulatory side that we can try and then make work this new technology/business solutions that we have found, instead of breaking because they don't know how to regulate it.
So basically, you have learned a lot about business models of everything that is used. In your case, you just need somebody to listen to, because you can tell them, this is where it's going wrong, this is where it's going wrong. Brilliant.
I mean, we failed quite a lot. Maybe somebody could learn out of it.
Excellent. So everyone willing to ask, Dusan is here, go ahead and ask. Google. Now that's a big perspective. What do you think? How can governments work with you? What needs to be changing for all of us to reinvent the catch up with the world?
Well, now I have the advantage of going after so many of my fellow speakers that have, I think, raised really important points. I think I would just highlight maybe three key areas. One of them touches on what has already been said, I think, and it's a great point. We really need a complete mind shift. It cannot just be a small adaptation in how we look at using technologies, how we look at economic growth going forward. We really need to rethink how we approach technologies. I think what we've seen, or what we continue to see, is that in the public sector, but also in the private sector, there's still a lot of focus on digitalization, in the sense that we looked at it 5 years ago, which was mostly about digitalization of processes, basic digital skills for the population. But now we're in a completely different era, and both the public and private sector and the economies, the users, the citizens really have to come along and try to go at the pace that the technology is developing. Now, I know that's a stretch goal, that's unlikely to happen very easily, but it is something that we should all work on together. And then the other aspect of it is that oftentimes, and we see it in the region and across Europe with the example of ministries. We do have ministries of digitalization in many countries, and I think that's very good. It's great that there's a department that is sort of an umbrella one for the whole agenda. But we cannot think of digital in silos. Digital is now affecting every aspect of life. It's not just in terms of the tech sector, and you've of course heard it here. Digital and thinking in terms of digital really has to be mainstreamed across different areas and processes. The second part is that now there's a great opportunity. We have a new EU mandate coming up on us. So it's a window for us to set a new tech agenda. And I think that agenda should really be based on promoting adoption of the latest digital technologies, on setting up the right regulatory framework that addresses the risks, but also leaves the space open for innovation. Should also be an environment that incentivizes investments and keeps the talent here, as was mentioned before. I think that's incredibly important, and also that fosters that talent locally via skills and workforce initiatives. And the last but not least, and this was also mentioned already, is cooperation. Of course, it's between public and private sectors. That's an important aspect, but I think equally as important is cooperation with like-minded partners. I think if we look at Europe from a global perspective, it really is in a good position to leverage the AI opportunity. But of course, there are aspects where Europe still has to catch up with some of the other countries and their technological advances. And I think Europe does not really have time to wait for its homegrown technologies in all areas. It should really work with like-minded states across the world. Of course, my company's home is in the US, so I would advocate for a strong transatlantic partnership. But also there are other liberal democracies across the world where I think we could really leverage the partnership for our own, but also for global economic growth.
All right, thank you. And Andrew, again, I finish with you because of the public and the private and the global view of governments and companies. How do you see this? What's the best way to work together and reinventing ourselves?
I mean, this is the first panel I've been on where the more other people speak, the more time I get because the counter is actually going up. Very innovative.
No, I promised 8 minutes, so don't go overboard.
So I feel like there's been a cascade of very interesting information for our audience. So I'm going to try and tie a few strands together. First, the example of Porsche I found extremely interesting because there was something that was left out, which is that suddenly for cars, the majority of the value is produced by non-car companies, so the batteries. So for most sort of mid-range electric cars, I think 40% of the value, right, yes, is the battery. So suddenly companies like Volkswagen were just buying half their value from another company, normally a Chinese company. So obviously, Porsche had to look for other potential revenue streams. And so that's a perfect example of playing to your strengths. So you had this sort of very sophisticated customer base, a great product, but suddenly the sort of margins, the profit margins, to be crude, were being eroded very aggressively. So instead of trying to produce your own batteries more cheaply, instead of trying to become a battery company, you became partly a services company. And so that's what, at a larger scale, European economies are going to have to do. So we've seen the results of the regional elections in Germany. Personally, for me, that's something that keeps me up at night. Not that general sort of swing, but what is going to happen to Germany? I mean, it was very successful economically until recently. And so now it's a sort of last mover, you could say, when it comes to emerging technologies. So it's in a very vulnerable position. And so the ability of German industry to transform is critical for Europe's economic, but also political future. Otherwise, we'll be in a real mess. And so to zoom out a little bit, in Europe, I feel we often focus on weaknesses. What are we bad at? Where are we falling behind? And the weaknesses are sort of there for everyone to see. The demographic trend is pretty negative. Compare that with an anti-immigration sentiment that's growing. How big will Europe be 20 years from now? Remains a big question. There's energy. We're unable to produce cheap, clean energy in Europe. And then there's the fragmentation of our internal market. So like Slovenia, Malta joined the European Union in 2004, and we believed we're joining a sort of finished product, finished market. That's far from the truth. We, as Eva touched on, we don't have a health union. We don't have a capital markets union. So that's a clear weakness. But again, these should only be addressed to the extent that they're holding us back. The rest of our energy should be focused on our strengths, like what Porsche did. If we focus only on weaknesses, we're going to be distracted. And we're going to basically build for a future that already happened. You know, we'll be building for the past. So that's my main message, that while we address our weaknesses, we should only do so to the extent that they really hold us back. All the rest of the sort of political capital, money, private sector, creativity should go towards Europe's strengths.
I remember hearing from World Economic Forum about the upcoming intelligent economy, which goes directly in this direction. Can you also give us just a final few words on that?
Yeah, you heard about it from me, because it's top secret. No?
Also?
No, so we did a lot of work on the fourth industrial revolution, so it's something we began to talk about in 2008, and that was the idea that emerging technology will transform the way people interact, the way they do business, the way value is created. Intelligent economies, so this is our sort of working term for what we see happening now. As you mentioned, Jorna, artificial intelligence comes in at the top of the value chain. It's unclear what impact it will have. Our estimates are that at least 50% of jobs will be affected. But for example, it depends how companies react. If you take like a very high value-added activity like law or medicine, will companies try to save costs? You know, will they deploy AI to begin firing people and stop training people? Or will they deploy that technology to move up the value chain? And so this sort of phenomenon on the way is what we describe as the intelligent age, or the age of intelligent economies. And again, to go back to playing to our strengths as Europeans, we missed the boat when it came to digital platforms, which is why we have Google here and not a European version of Google. But when it comes to the technologies that will shape the next wave of economic growth, like biotech, like quantum, for example, like the space economy, Europe actually has a pretty good fighting chance. We're very strong when it comes to what some people call deep tech, so innovation that is very science heavy, because we have some of the world's best universities. I say we, I mean, I'm talking about Europe, because the most innovative universities tend to be outside the European Union, in Switzerland and the UK. And so that's, yeah. And most of the most innovative European economies tend to be in very predictable places, in the Nordics. And that, again, playing to our strengths, clearly some European countries know how to innovate. I mean, Denmark is one of Europe's smallest economies. It has Europe's most valuable company, Novo Nordisk. So what can we learn from, you know, our own success stories, which I feel is something that we, or at least governments in Europe, all too often fail to do. When it comes to capital markets as well, say Sweden has an extremely deep, effective capital market. Why is it that some other European countries struggle to do that? How can we convince Sweden to contribute to a European capital market, rather than be happy with its own highly sophisticated market that will never be able to compete with the scale found in the United States or even China?
See, why I wanted Andrew to also touch on the point of intelligent economy is that the biggest productivity gains are yet about to happen, which means that the fast will start going faster and the rest will start going slower. And this is something that is not that we need to talk about and say that we want to be at the front, right? It's something where actually the people in this room, the decision makers of business and also government, we need to understand that our role is in the first two pillars of absorption of technology. We need to be the ones, to be the pallbearers of this technology And it's not about saying that somebody else needs to do it, because that has been done for the last 30 years and it didn't get us any closer. And I think the level of innovation and potential that European Union has and that we can deliver is very high. And we need our companies to be innovative, and we need to be the pallbearers of re-innovating the governments, and also the companies like Porsche, and Google is also completely transformed. Roche is completely transformed. I just learned that Telecom is in front of Porsche in voice commands. So we need to be the embracers. That would be my last final thought. Not to support it, we need to be the embracers of technology. It's precisely the people in this room. If this is that we can take home with us, think about this. Think about it. Are we embracing it enough in our own organizations? And then start making small steps. Then we're there. So let's do it. That was us. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us. And thank you for staying a bit longer with us.